I didn't even. And so. Okay, great. Always forget about the Zoom.
Can you guys see it?
Before we get started, we've had a request from Jenny Buddenborg, who's applying to the El Pomar Foundation to get a picture of City Council. Unfortunately, Tracy is not here, but I would like for someone to take a picture. Who's volunteered to take a picture? Come
Oh,
on.
Nancy.
Yeah,
Okay.
somebody.
Take off mask for a
No way.
You can
second.
leave one if you want. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, so that's the
I
Jenny
was smiling. I
for
really
application.
was.
Good.
I was looking
Under
at
your
the
mask.
eyes.
I'm gonna remind her that Tim was smiling. In which case, it is now 6:01, and I call to order the city council meeting Tuesday, October the 5th of 2021. Where to go? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Larissa.
Here.
Councilmember Hill.
Present.
Mayor Lobby.
Here,
Councilmember Gowing. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Green. Here. Councilmember Forgensi.
Present.
Councilmember Tharp. Here.
thank you very much. We're looking at the agenda at this point. Is there anything on the agenda we would like to add, subtract, or change? See none, I would appreciate a motion.
Gowing moves to approve the agenda.
Hill seconds.
Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Housekeeping matters, anything anybody would like to talk about before we get completely rolling?
I'd like to talk a bit about the recent homecoming parade, but it could be later too, if later's better.
Go ahead.
First, it was awesome, had a great time. Was out there with the elementary school, which was great. It was a bit concerning though, that there was still oncoming traffic. Everything went well, thankfully. But I could see that being a problem, you know, little kids were running around chasing candy. It also kind of blocked the people on the east side of the street from seeing the parade well. So I checked in with one of the Leadville police officers there, Officer Hanson, and I'm glad that he and other officers were there, so grateful for their presence, as well as a state patrol officer. And they said that they couldn't close the whole street down because of staffing shortages. And I do empathize with that. I do know Leadville PD is short plenty. But it makes me wonder if we could find another solution for any parades coming up. I think if we're going to do a parade, we should shut the whole street down for safety. And I'm wondering if we could do some kind of combination of volunteers, which I know isn't always easy, but you know, taping streets or something. Just I'm wondering if we can find a solution to that, because the parades were great, good turnout, but just that one safety concern.
I would say this, I don't buy that excuse. We did the parade, St. Patrick's Day practice parade. We had the sheriff on one end and one police officer on the other end, and we closed off Harrison Avenue.
Great, yeah, let's do
So
that.
there's no reason.
Okay,
That excuse is, I find it lacking.
okay. Well, that's great to hear. Yeah,
I think to interject, but
Yeah.
as the procedure processes the TUPs, and the TUPs are approved the way that they're written, and that one was approved with the entire street cut off.
was it?
I feel you, I went to watch out the upstairs window and panicked. Ran
Yeah.
Downstairs, I could do something about it, but I completely panicked when I saw the other traffic, but at that point, and that very day, I think one of the officers had come up and said, don't we have a parade today? And I had sent the approved TUP
Okay,
everyone involved. I don't think it's fair. I would have to agree with the mayor on this one. It was approved to have the entire street shut down. So
Okay.
that's what bothers me as a staff person.
I'll have that conversation with
Okay.
Chief. Anyway,
yeah, thanks for following up and pursuing that.
Mayor, at the St. Practice Parade, we did have traffic coming up from the south or because when we were in front of the Silver Dollar, there was traffic coming, and so the entire street wasn't shut down for the St. Patty's Day
well,
practice, maybe at the
wasn't until right
front.
at the end, because remember, we were all assembled in front of the courthouse. There was no traffic.
But in that section, because as soon as you went on down, there was traffic coming at us. And so everybody was trying to kind of watch
Okay.
and make sure, we need to stay in this west side lane.
I didn't remember that. I do
Yeah.
know when we were coming down and in front of the courthouse, we had,
Mhm.
the whole assemblage of the parade was there with the bagpipes and everything. There was no traffic of any kind.
Yeah.
No, there couldn't have been.
Yeah.
We took up the entirety of the street. So I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but I'll have this
Yeah.
conversation. Thank you.
And if there is a genuine lack of resources that would not allow us to do that, I do think we should consider not approving parades until we have the resources that are appropriate. But I'd rather just make it happen because parades are awesome.
I would like to say that our 4th of July parade had a similar hiccup at the very beginning
did it
when we
really?
had incoming traffic as the parade turned off of 9th and onto Harrison. I actually had to stop people and get them off east, going down East 6 because the parade, there was going to be a head-on collision between parade and people coming down from the south to north. So
West 9th there was really hectic as people were gathering. The road wasn't shut down. There was an officer there who looked new to me. I didn't recognize him. And he hadn't shut the road down. So yeah, I don't know. There's some room to smooth that out.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anybody else? I'll let you know, we have one applicant so far for the city administrator position. I'll kind of keep you informed as time goes by. And we'll be talking about that again here in just a little while. The week before last, after our last city council meeting, we have the Irish delegation here. We have the community meal. What a week. It was quite amazing.
Yeah.
It was something to behold. And flowers came off the avenue this morning. Hated to see them go, but to get into the first week in October and still have had the flowers on the avenue was felt pretty good, because there have been times in the past, last year, as an example, where they came off the second week in September. Anybody else with any housekeeping matters? Okay, thank you. At this time, we would like to hear from anybody in the public who would like to speak to City Council. If you have comments on items that are not on the agenda, please come up and introduce yourself, give us your address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak to City Council. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. At this time, we have the approval of the
Mayor,
minutes.
wait. Sarah Mudge had her hand up.
Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting we have Zoom. Sorry.
I'm sorry, council. I probably should have written something in the chat too as a request. Good evening. Thanks for being here and all that you do. I do appreciate every one of you, and I know that can't be said enough. I wanted to make a comment. Sorry, Sarah Mudge, 613 East 7th Street, city resident. The comment I am making, I acknowledge I kind of am wearing a bit of both hats, though I am not making a statement, a formal position or statement on behalf of the Board of Commissioners as a commissioner myself, but I would like to request that council consider limiting UTV licensing, and at the very least, which I know is something that we are going to be looking at and having an opportunity to chat through together, hopefully in upcoming recreation master planning opportunities, we can talk about kind of the impacts and how we might monitor the use of motorized vehicles and where they are actually legally able to be directed for the use. I think that probably between the city and the county, we should really coordinate licensing kind of in the way that we do with special events. Permitting in the way that we do special events, because you might permit a business that's located in the city, but they recreate and have uses outside in the county. And we also, it is a county failure or a shortcoming that we don't have really a process to go through with that. But I wonder if we can maybe put our heads together and think about something that would kind of benefit at least kind of an educational outreach to folks who are particularly guiding tours, snowmobiles or the razors. And as we come up into the winter season, I know the snowmobile high riders are going to be should be grooming about the same mileage as they always have been, but it's a continued effort to try to mitigate our community members' recreation experience as well as the visitors that come. So I think we've done that, or the city had done that for marijuana licensing and whatnot. And I think it might be perhaps something to look into as far as being able to monitor. And as you talk about capacity of enforcement, that's certainly also another aspect of that to work together on. So I also wanted to add, aside from the UTV use, on October 13th, next Wednesday, we'll be having a community wildfire protection plan event for community outreach and a map walk that we'll present the maps that we've been working on with partners to identify kind of high priority areas in the county where we will hopefully we'll focus to look for some funding and gather resources to apply prescriptions for forest health and fuel mitigation. So I hope you all can join us then.
What time is that CWPP meeting?
It is at Free and it is from 6 to 8 p.m. And we'll be sending out a kind of a link for an online view of some of the maps and for feedback virtually as well. And we're aiming to do that a couple days before the event and have that open for sometime after the event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, are there any other comments? Now I'm going to look at the Zoom screen. Are there any comments from the public on items not on the agenda? Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we are considering the approval of the minutes from September the 21st. I have a couple things. One's very minor, where it says department reports in the first sentence. It needs to say they have hired. On the second page, we're actually going through the department reports. It says building department report submitted by, it's Paul Clarkson, not Paul Anderson. Those are the only changes that I have. Anybody else?
I just have a question about this verbiage on department reports, the first bullet point. Police department presented by Shannon. Hal Edwards is now the police commissioner.
Correct.
I've never heard that position referred to as the police commissioner.
He's a police commissioner because he cannot be a police chief by statute until he is post-certified. And he has to go through a 2-week refresher course and then take the post exam again because he hasn't been post-certified in about 8 or 9 years. So that's why.
Thank
And
you.
that was actually the job that was proffered to him, was as commissioner, not as chief.
Thank you for the explanation.
Any other changes? In which case, I would entertain a motion, please.
Dowling moves to approve the regular city council meetings of Tuesday, September 21st, 2021, with the earlier mentioned edits.
Regency seconds.
Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Next up, we have the audit report. We continued acceptance of the audit report that was presented at the last city council meeting. Councilmember Lewison, you've had an opportunity to review that report. Do you have any input on it?
No, I'm good. I appreciate the extra time.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any comments on the audit? In which case, I would entertain a motion to approve the audit presented by McMahon and Associates.
Councilmember Tharp moves to accept the 2021 financial statement audit from McMahon and Associates of the City of Leadville for the year ended December 31st, 2020.
Do I hear a second?
Hill seconds.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Tharp,
Yes.
Councilmember for Genesee,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Green,
Yes.
Councilmember Gowing,
Yes.
Mayor Lobby,
Yes.
Councilmember Hill,
Yes.
Councilmember Larritzen.
Yes,
Thank you very much. Next up, we have, we've been talking about, we have a lot of code changes on our docket. And I've had this conversation with Christiana last week. We talked about some priorities, but I want to hear from City Council about if they have priorities on this list that they feel like are more important than other issues.
This is not an exhaustive list, is it?
It,
Is it?
it seems pretty exhaustive to me, but if you see something we've missed, please add it.
Oh, just some other loose ends would be revisiting the IGA with the building department. And then I don't know if hiring a planning contractor goes on this, or if that's a separate.
That's not really a code change, but yeah, that is definitely on a list somewhere.
Are there any code change requirements for the city administrator position to shift that leadership structure of the city?
The answer is yes. Thank you. That's a good catch because we know that needs to happen.
Okay.
So good.
Can you repeat that?
There are some necessary code changes to allow for the hiring of the city administrator to structure the city leadership in that way.
Thank you. I will tell you that when Christian and I talked, we both felt like the single most important priority was to change Title 17. The code change requirements for Title 17. It's been an incredible headache to have to go through 4 public hearings to make changes to Title 17. And it would only change it would still go through planning and zoning, and they would send it to city council, and city council would go through the hearings. But P&Z wouldn't have to go through 2 hearings. That's the intent.
What is Title 17?
Title 17 is land use. And we've been through it before with some of the changes we wanted to make to Title 17. It's just difficult. It takes forever.
Mayor, and we had also, earlier, the animal shelter, there was a question with trying to work with the county, so the fee structures were in agreement. It causes so much confusion because the county has a set of
Yes.
fees. And so I just want to make sure that we try and work with them and
Yep.
somehow, so we have,
Our first step will be to adopt those fees by reference.
okay,
And then if the county can put that also in code, then it's easy. Then you have one fee schedule that both codes
right.
apply to.
And that'll help everyone out, I
Sure.
think, citizens, so we won't have the confusion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I would, 2 things I see on this prioritization is I would, if I could, lower the priority of the Historic Preservation Commission change requests. If we were discussing that, and it's not against historic preservation whatsoever. However, something I just want to bring up once again is that we have not had consistency with reports or with folks being in here to actually represent themselves or a representative from the Historic Preservation Commission. And until we have a little bit more consistency, I would prefer them nailing this before giving them more responsibility, if that's what we're looking for.
Thank you. I'm going to explain why I disagree, at least on one point, and here's why. There is a 6-month caveat in the code that is so dangerous. I'll use an example. Somebody wants to come and tear down a building in downtown Leadville, okay, in our historic downtown. And we say, no, you can't do that. 6 months later, if we haven't figured out a way to buy that building from them or move it, they automatically get permission to turn it down. It is so incredibly dangerous right now.
Well, it has been that way, and I do not disagree with you about that situation. I just feel that if for example, that code change perhaps may be good, but I don't think the summary of all.
Then when we get further along with this, then we will ask the HPC to come to us and make their pitch for the changes they've asked for. I think that's reasonable, and I don't know how else we would do it anyway.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Max, you're referring to the expansion of that zone, is that?
I don't necessarily disagree with that either. I just disagree with the fact that I want consistency in the reports and our representation here when we have these types of certificates of appropriateness or requests for whatever it is, and then maybe talk about it. I just don't want to give them, and these are great individuals, and I know they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts as well. And so I just am a little nervous if we give them more responsibility, then we're going to have less.
Okay, thank you.
And the last piece too is separate and note is it does say marijuana renewals as an administrative function, which I agree. However, perhaps we should turn it all code to cannabis renewals, considering I learned recently that marijuana is a derogatory term and could be considered a microaggression for certain people, and it's not necessarily the term that people like using anymore for the production of cannabis. And if we want to get to the 21st century, and that's the way that people are supposed to be talking about that, I think we should talk about it as well in that same way.
I think we can probably discuss that. It's going to depend a lot on the state and state statute and how it's worded in state statute and whether or not we can take a different tack. So a very good suggestion. Thank you. So in terms of this, pretty high on my priority list is formula businesses, because we have a moratorium. So we have to make sure by the time that moratorium is up, that we have considered and put in place in code how we want to deal with formula or franchise businesses. Obviously, the parking permit program, it goes away at the end of the year on the 31st of December. And we've made a council decision that we're not going to actually implement picking up those signs until the end of April. So it's not like we don't have the time, but that has to be a change in code as well.
Are these written in order of your
No.
proposed prioritization?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, they're random.
What is E-STIP?
STIP is it's a tax agreement between a business and the city, and that's how I'll use two examples that I know of. Two grocery stores in Summit County were put in place because of STIP agreements between, I think the first one was Frisco. They did an STIP agreement with the Natural Grocers. And I think I forget what the other one was. Anyway, nonetheless, Mark Bodonia was a big proponent of this when he was here as the EDC director, and I believe that I don't know how many instances there might be where we would want to implement it. But I have to tell you, if somebody comes here and wants to open a grocery store and they need tax relief to do that, I'd like to be in a position to do that. And so we need that in code.
Just for clarification, it stands for Enhanced Sales Tax Incentive Program.
There we go.
All right.
Thank you.
Just a question on the evacuation permit changes.
It's excavation.
Oh.
I caught that too.
I am so
I was
sorry.
gonna say, what are we evacuating?
And we
Okay.
need a permit to evacuate.
Excavation.
Yeah, excavation permit changes. We just have some internal conversations around permitting and the differences between a street cut and an alley. There's some very definite differences in how we should be approaching those, but they're not defined in code. So. I will follow up with city council as Christiana and I go down this road, and of course you'll be part of obviously any and all changes that we bring.
For the housing policy advisory team requests, are there any points of urgency there regarding certain deadlines or?
I don't know of any deadlines. However, that it does have a certain sense of urgency because as we go forward and we seek grants, they want to know that we have some of the things that the policy advisory team that deal with how zoning works for density, particularly, and how that affects affordable housing. So that's one code change that's going to be very important. So we're going to do them all at the same time. Oh, man. We do have a work cut out for us. Poor Christiana. Is Christiana on the line? She
Yes.
is. Look at that.
How does that
Well, I
work?
do think we need to, put number one on the list, the parking.
Okay.
We need to get that dealt with.
I totally agree.
If we're gonna have that
You'll
done
notice
by
I've
the
got
end-
several things
by-
there for
by
parking.
the end of April,
Yeah.
we need to get on that right away.
And I've talked to Christiana about, we have, our code says that the downtown parking is 2 hours. 2 hours is just it's not enough time. In talking to business people, we kind of arrived at a consensus. I probably talked to 20 different business people. They said 2 hours is too tight. We want people to have time to walk around town, enjoy lunch, do whatever they need to do. So we made it 4 hours, put signs up, but it's still 2 hours in code. Same thing with there's a parking policy that says you can't be parked in one place more than 48 hours on a city street. But on a 3-day weekend, you're not going to meet that requirement. So I'd like to change that.
To 72.
I think 96. I think, give it some,
Yeah, we should really.
yeah.
dig
So
our
that's been
heels
on my
in and get-
mind. And then, of course, we have the possibility of a neighborhood permitting program if we can figure out how to put that together. Okay, if we're okay with this discussion, okay, if we move on.
Do we need to put something on the agenda in November, one of these topics?
I think we probably should, especially since by November, I'm going to want to have worked with Christiana and be ready to bring some of these things forward to city council for consideration.
Okay, I'll follow up
So-
with you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you.
So does that look like Christiana working with you to write a draft of the proposed changes and then we?
No, actually, she does it, and then I hand it to you. That's a proper protocol, I believe. No, yeah, I'm being a little bit flippant, but yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Okay, next up, we have the organizational chart. I would tell you when I put this together, there's nothing official about this. It hasn't been published, it is nowhere, all I was trying to do is just put together a thought process around what would our city organization look like once we have a city administrator? And I actually thought once a city administrator is hired, that person might be the ideal person to decide how this organizational chart actually works.
Well, I think I would agree with that. If we could leave it as is for now, and then once that administrator is hired, that they should definitely have some input on that.
Well, until we hire them, this wouldn't matter anyway,
Right.
since it's a future vision of what might.
I know
be.
Max had some input on it, but I think leaving it as it is for now until we get the administrator in place is fine with me.
Thinking of getting the administrator in place, I would like to give you a quick update and then I'll digress. I met with Christy Doon, and she was under the understanding a couple of months ago that we would put in our application the first week in September, and that we would know early in October whether we were funded. It turns out that's not how it's going to work. I'm going to make a presentation to DOLA on, I believe it's December the 6th for this application, for this grant application. So we cannot, until they have granted us, assuming we receive the grant and they have put the contract in place, we can't hire until then. So that kind of throws a wrench in our plans, and but really nothing we can do about that right now.
So when would you anticipate the grant being?
Well, it's all going to depend on their contractors and the contracting process in DOLA. Okay, let's say December the 6th, and they give us a decision that later that week. They say, yes, we're gonna grant you this, and then the contract has to be put in place by their organization, and then we have to sign it. So end of the year. So it could be a January 1st hire, I guess is what I'm going with.
So my input to this organization chart is that span of control is normally to have 3 to 7 direct reports and to be the most efficient if possible. This is 13 direct reports, if not more, because you have Tabor home docents listed, so that could be multiple there. I think you can get away with 8 to 10 as a city administrator. I just think that 13 direct reports, even though some of them could be minor, for example, the municipal judge I think we could try to get this down a little bit more. And to Tim's point, do we really need to do that today? No. I just feel that to set them up for success, a City of Leadville org chart should be approved somehow where we have it signed and in place, what everybody has agreed upon by the mayor or in the city administrator. So I do feel that that could be something that could occur once the city administrator is here. My other suggestion too, Mayor, is I understand it's a street department supervisor. However, if it would be a street and parks department supervisor, considering they do a lot of work in the parks already as it stands, you could put the season and parks maintenance underneath them. I think there's some efficiencies that can be gained by just making the change, and words do matter. I mean, and I don't think it's any difference except for a word there of what they already do, and just so they understand the holistic nature of their job as it stands today.
Right. I think I like your idea about the parks maintenance being under street. I've been talking to street about that. That is a move we may make right now. We finally have a maintenance person for the first, we've been trying to hire that person for 5 years and never could have anybody that would do the job or could do the job. And now we have somebody who's willing to do that job. So this is new for us in terms of the paradigm. Plus we have a new street supervisor. So I have that parks person answering to me right now. And that's gone pretty well. That person has certainly supported Leadville and the parks and streets and bathrooms and the Main Street program in Sites Park. Yes, ma'am.
Christiane has a comment.
Yes, Christiana.
Thanks, guys. I just wanted to point out 2 things about the organizational chart for your future consideration. One, the municipal judge is generally appointed and removed by city council and should not be overseen by the city administrator. That is never ever the case, that a city administrator has power over or supervisory responsibilities over the municipal judge. The second thing, just to remember, in talking about changes to the titles of your department directors or department heads, that may also require a code change. And so that any changes to titles, we'll just want to be on the same page about that so that we can incorporate that as needed into any code changes when we update it for the city administrator position. That's it.
Christiana, could an organizational chart be in code by reference?
I don't usually see that, Mayor. I mean, I don't think that it's out of the question necessarily, but I don't usually see organizational charts in the code.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts, Max?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have in my meeting with Christy Doon, she has asked to be part of that hiring committee. She was part of the hiring committee for the county manager. And so, as you can well imagine, I said, yes, of course. We'd love to have you as a member of that. I would like for Donna and I, since, you know, the city's really been, Donna and I and Sarah have really been foremost in running the city for quite a few years now. I would like for Donna and I to be on that committee. I would like to keep the committee fairly tight. So I'd like to know if there's a city council member who would like to be part of that hiring committee.
I would like to do it.
Anybody else who would like to be on that hiring committee?
Not it.
What's that?
Not it.
Okay.
So far, Donna, Tracy, you, and
Christy Doon.
Christy Doon.
Do you need more representation?
I really don't. I mean, I'd rather keep it to 4. The county kept it to 4. I thought that was a good number. So I could expand it if council wants, but I prefer to keep it pretty tight. Tracy, thank you very much. Thanks for raising your hand.
Thanks, Tracy.
Next up, we have a request for $500 for Trick or Treat Street. I would say that has been traditionally the amount we've donated to Trick or Treat Street, and we'll be hearing from them in terms of their temporary use permit this evening. Does City Council have any problem? This is not like a City Council vote or anything. Does City Council have any problem with a $500 donation to Trick or Treat Street?
That come out of contingency?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, just like everything else. We got $23,000 in there for crying out loud. Actually, we have about $8,000 in there right this second. Is everybody okay with that? Great, thank you very much. All right. Next up, we have a series of 3 conditionals. Certificates of appropriateness. Thank you, Tim. Keep me on track here. And these are all 3 public hearings. So we will open a public hearing for all 3 COAs. Then we will discuss each one and have public input and close the public input portion of each of those 3 before we deliberate. And then we'll close the entirety of the public hearing once we've heard all 3 certificates. Okay, and so we will start the public hearing process. Good evening. My name is Greg Lobby. I'm the mayor of the city of Leadville. This is a public hearing before the city council to consider a certificate of appropriateness, 3 of them, for projects in the National Landmark District. Tonight, we will consider the following certificates of appropriateness for 140 East 8th Street, 616 and 618 Harrison Avenue, and 225 Harrison Avenue. Okay. When the public hearings are open, I will first attend to some preliminary housekeeping matters. I will then ask for staff to discuss highlights of the staff reports, followed by the applicants to make a brief presentation of his or her case. Then testimony of any individuals in the audience who wish to speak in favor of the application, and then those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the application. The applicants will have an opportunity for rebuttal, which is the applicant's opportunity to respond to any comments made by members of the public. After rebuttal, I will close the public input portion of public hearings and allow city council an opportunity to ask questions. Once the public input portion of the hearings are closed, we will not accept additional testimony unless it is in response to questions posed by the city council with the applicant or staff. At the conclusion of our questioning, the council will render a decision, which could include a continuation of the hearings. This public hearing is quasi judicial, which means we have to follow certain procedural requirements to establish a record. For this reason, it is important that when you speak, you identify yourself. If you would like to submit written materials, please understand that the city will have to hold on to those materials for at least 30 days after city council renders its decision. Are there any questions about the public hearing procedure? Okay, thank you. I will now open the public hearings for 140 East 8, 616, 618 Harrison Avenue, and 225 Harrison Avenue. But first, I need to ask city council, has anybody in the city council had any ex parte communications with any of these three applicants?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody on city council have any conflicts of interest with any of these three COAs?
No.
Great, thank you very much. The first hearing is for 140 East 8th Street. This says staff first and applicant second, but I prefer to reverse that. I would like to hear first from the applicant at 140 East 8th Street.
Hello, I'm Stephen Mack. Should I give you a little background about this?
Just give us an idea of what you're doing and
Sure. I'm a 4-year resident of Leadville. I'm moving from the west side of town to the east side of town. I'm also a civil engineer with over 20 years of practice, particularly in forensic engineering. I serve on the Cloud City Conservation Center, helping with the built environment here in Leadville, doing energy upgrades to the homes in our community. In January of this year, I purchased the home on 140 East 8th Street. I'm intending to move from the west side of town to the east side of town. This is not an investment. This is where I want to live with my family. The home, as we bought it, had several decades of moisture damage and structural damage. You're familiar with some of these things I'm dealing with, a lot of rotten wood. In May, I was issued a building permit for some of those repairs. I have issued an amendment to that permit in June, which is what we're talking about. The amended permit has a deck. There are also some changes to the roof and windows. These are all solely for the purpose of increasing energy efficiency. So again, my family can live in the home. The deck is located on the northwest corner of the property. It is an addition, I think, but as the way it's been determined, I've made every effort to make it as unvisually apparent and give me, quite frankly, a little privacy from the lot. It's a corner lot, and I think all other areas of the yard, you're basically on the sidewalk. I am not proposing to tear down the building, as we were talking about earlier. I am not, right at this time, talking about changing the cladding, although I do have intents to bring the cladding more in our shingled siding and shiplap siding that's traditional and historic. I love Leadville. I'm trying to bring this moment words to this badness. Earlier, when I presented on this, there was no contest to what I've done. I've been working on the home since January. Every member of the public that stopped by has been excited to hear what I'm doing. Nobody has offered rebuttal. I've been hiring my neighbor, Rob Kenyon, who's on an hourly basis to help me with some of these repairs. Of course, before this became a formal process, I discussed this in detail with him. The only thing he wants is to have a beer with me up on the deck. There's no contest I know about this, but this is a process I respect. And I'm here to answer any of your questions about it or any parts of my certificate.
thank you very much. We may have questions for you here in a couple of moments.
Thank you.
I would like to hear from staff.
As you can see, the APC did meet on this last week.
Did you either go here?
House that we can date back to 1883 to 1885. There's also a lot of one of the things that the HPC was looking at on this particular COA is the roof. The ridge line and everything, there's about, we say about 6 or 7 different roofs on this house now. Four. Okay, sorry. Point being, this plan is to take it back to the streamline that it once was, also the same with the windows. So the HPC and staff was pretty excited about this one. I wouldn't say excited, it just meets everything that we would like to see in the historic district. Other than the roof line being changed and the addition to it is what caused it to come to the COA. Otherwise, we tried, as you know, not to bother people with what they're doing. But then it was exciting to find out that this house is a lot more historic than we originally thought. And his main concern is to try to get it back to its original state. So, something we love to see.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would ask if there's anybody in the public who would like to speak in favor of the certificate of appropriateness. Seeing none, I ask, does anybody like to speak in opposition to the certificate of appropriateness? Still none. I'm going to assume there's no need for rebuttal, in which case I would entertain a motion to close the public input portion of the public meeting.
Who moves to close the public input portion of the public meeting?
Gallon seconds.
Is there any other discussion? It's a little slow to go. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. At this time, we are in deliberation, so we can ask questions either of the applicant or of staff.
I guess my one concern would be to make sure that this deck meets height requirements in code.
I can speak to that, sir.
Mhm.
The code requires decks be less than 35 feet, and less than 25.
Thank you.
And so the assumption is that your building plans have been vetted to the building department, is that correct?
So the first permit I applied for in May has been approved, and that's where I'm presently working on them. The formal plans for the deck have not been approved. They're waiting for this approval before they're going to do their code review. I'm confident that that will make it through code review.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant or for staff?
How long do you think it will take if, say, you're approved? What does the time frame or timeline look like for this roofing project? Because I go by it often and there are all these different roof lines and you're just kind of wondering, because it looks like at times it could be kind of extensive. So is it going to be done by you, or are you going to have someone else come in and actually do the whole thing, or is it going to be more of a phased in project where you do what you can as you have the time?
It's a complicated question because we are experiencing a very busy time in the construction industry, as you're aware. And there are both material shortage and staffing shortages that I am wrestling with. I do have every intention, as I'm watching the snow come down Mount Desert, to finish before this winter. I'm very determined to make that happen. I do have help. I'm hiring a lot of help. Formally, I'm doing all this under my own as a homeowner permit, and as the job engineer, the homeowner, and floor sweeper, concrete mixer, and everything in between. My only hesitation of saying absolutely yes is that this is a challenging project, you're right. But I do have every intention of being done and having Thanksgiving dinner in there at this point. It just might be rough floors and are finished, and I'm not going to drive all that stuff.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Stephen. Go ahead and have a seat. Does anybody have any issues with this certificate? No? Then I would entertain a motion, please.
Gowing moves to approve the certificate of appropriateness for the renovation and repair structural moisture damage and deck and stairs installation at 140 East 8th Street, Leadville, Colorado, 80461, based on the criteria set forth in the related COA application materials and staff report dated September 28, 2021, the City of Leadville's Municipal Codes, Section 17.44, and the 2015 Leadville Comprehensive Plan.
Green seconds.
Is there any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Green,
Yes.
Mayor Labby,
Yes.
Councilmember Gowrie,
Yes.
Councilmember Forgensi.
Yes.
Councilmember Tharp,
Yes.
Councilmember Hill,
Yes.
Councilmember Larissa.
Yes.
Thank you. Good luck, Mr. Mack.
Thank you.
Looks cool.
It does look cool.
It's a side house.
No daylight left.
We are still in our public hearing process for certificates of authenticity. Or is it appropriate? Nonetheless, the next one up is 616, 618 Harrison Avenue, sometimes better known as the Manhattan. Do we have anybody here?
No, if I could just make one, okay. Both the next two COAs were under the Open for Business grant, and they did not receive their grant. Nancy and I both have tried to convince them to go ahead and go through with the COA because it's good for two years, 3 years, they can't remember. And should they get another grant, they would be ready to go. Last I heard, I thought they were coming,
They did want to continue. I think it was short notice or something, so I'm not sure if we continue this.
that's up to city council, that's totally up to them.
Well, I'd like to ask, is there any urgency to the request of their COE? I mean, are they chomping at the bit to get started? I guess would be the first question.
I don't believe they're going to do any work.
Are they going to be inclined to go forward with this project without the grant itself?
I wouldn't say no. So
Okay.
yeah, that definitely is worth considering.
Then
Something that they're-
I'm going to suggest to city council that this is a continuation possibility in terms of, I'd like to know more whether or not they actually go forward with this before we go to the trouble of giving them a COA. Anybody else?
Mayor, I do have a question for you, just because I'm also going to apologize that I had to cut short my Luro meeting the other day because I was on that Ptarmigan Fire and Summit. However, would these types of projects be something that the TIF would then be good for?
Absolutely. I can't wait
Yes.
to have money to help people do these projects. And it's a great question, and even better question, because TIF can be granted retroactively to projects.
Oh.
It could be.
The Urban Renewal Authority can grant tax increment retroactively to people who have gone through projects.
So
they can do the project and then get money
And
afterwards.
then they can make a request to the Urban Renewal Authority.
So without the TIF and how we're starting to supply that, when are we expecting to have funding available for projects such as this, to this order?
Another great question. The answer is we have some money forthcoming for TIF right now, but in my conversations with the treasurer, the county treasurer, they're really struggling with this. They had somebody who was supposed to set the process up for them to pay us, to pay the URA, the tax increment. That person did it wrong, apparently. And then that person was trying to get it right and then left, I believe it was Dola, I believe he was working for Dola. And now they have a new person. And then when I talked to Patrick last week, that person was sick. So I'm a little uncertain as to where we are in getting the payment. There are amounts in place that they should be paying us. And but the actual timing of that is uncertain in my mind.
So, and we don't necessarily know the process for them to apply for this. However, I would think that an applicant that has gone through their certificate of appropriateness would have a better chance of then receiving said funds, because that's probably a gate that they have to go through.
I hadn't really
regardless.
thought about that, but certainly in the historic district, that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Setting out the actual formal application for TIF funds is something that we're going to be doing through the URA in the next
That is a good
while,
point.
right?
Anne is supposed to bring us
Mhm.
those forms. I think she's talked about it. She hasn't. She's not reinventing those forms. We just have to put them in play.
Here's my question. If we grant a certificate of appropriateness, how long is it good for? Like,
Well, there was some uncertainty. You said 2 years or 3 years?
2 years. I thought the code had 2 years.
Okay.
Is what I thought.
Well, that's what most permits are good for, 2 years. So I'm going to make the assumption that you're absolutely correct. It's a 2-year permitting process.
I have a question about this particular COA. Does the rehabilitation of the neon sign need a COA? You need a COA to rehabilitate a sign?
I think the answer is yes, because it is an historic sign in a landmark district.
And it's on Harrison, so that was another reason. And they have to take it down and send it off to get rehabilitated and bring it back.
Quite a process.
Quite a process.
An expensive process.
Oh, my. Yeah.
What, how much did he say?
25,000?
That was 25,000. I remember there was a number, it was a pretty big number. We can go forth and grant the COA as far as I'm concerned.
And if you have questions, I can try to answer them. It's totally up to you guys.
What would city
Well-
council like to do? Would they like to continue this and then have a presentation from the applicant?
I think my feeling is that if there's not an urgency to it and they're not likely to proceed without funding assistance, that it would be a disservice to proceed with the COA because that puts them on a timeline and I hope
point.
in 2 years we'll have some TIF funds, but
Yeah.
I don't know
In
how
2
much.
years,
we'll
I
have.
believe that we will have
Yeah.
TIF funds.
I-
So that's an exciting possibility. In which case I would entertain a motion for continuation.
This is my favorite one to do. Councilmember for Genesee moves to continue it, the certificate of appropriateness for the rehabilitation of second floor windows and neon sign at 616 to 618 Harrison Avenue, Leadville, Colorado 80461, based on the criteria set forth in related COA application materials and staff report date September 28, 2021. The end.
Do we need a date certain?
No, not in this case.
You're just leaving it open-ended then?
Absolutely.
5 seconds.
Is there any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember for Genesee.
Yes.
Councilmember Tharp.
Yes.
Councilmember Larissa.
Yes.
Councilmember Hill.
Yes.
Mayor Lobby.
Yes.
Councilmember Gowing.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Green.
Yes.
Lori, would you, let the applicant know that we certainly are not, in opposition to their COA, but it is continued to a date not certain. All right, good deal. And next up, we are still in the public meeting process, and we have 225 Harrison Avenue. Would the applicant like to make a presentation to us?
And she's in the same situation as well, so.
Yeah, maybe it is better to continue, I'm not quite sure.
Do you feel that you will probably not go forward with your project without the funding from the grant?
We have to figure out a way to do a bunch of things regardless of whether, we didn't get this particular grant. But, I think eventually we'll be able to find some kind of help with it, and so I'm representing Nadia King Bill as well, and so we have some issues that we definitely need to take care of. For safety and health of the building. So grants or no grants, we're gonna have to figure out ways on it. Some of the things that are in paperwork that we sure are replacing windows, we can get by without windows and replacing the cornice and woodwork for quite a while. They are rapidly deteriorating. But what we really need to do is take care of some structural damage on the northwest corner of the building back on Third Street.
Right.
So water has been getting in there and flooding the basement. And the previously was a lot of runoff issue down the back of the building that the original plywood broke. And so that back corner is sinking. The previous owners, previous owners of the building had undermined the sidewalk by pulling a bunch of rubble out that had been put there during the sidewalk project back in the 80s. And so it's that back stoop is falling in and allowing street runoff in the basement building. So we need to take care of that somehow, whether it's through grant dollars or some other way. Now, for this presentation to last week, it was kind of a rushed application that doesn't have all of the, have not had structural engineering and draw plans because we needed to get the packet just to try to make this grant review yet. We are working with Heritage Windows, Bill McDonald, who's refurbishing the Pink Church, and now they're down at Form and Design to try to locate other funds for this project. And we'll probably have to talk to the city too about it since it's going to involve messing with the street and the sidewalk. So ideally, what we will want to do is also open the original basement egress into that, which is going to involve tearing up the sidewalk. Now that's like a dream plan. We may not get to that, but at the very least, we need to fortify that corner sooner than later, probably in the next year. So I don't know if it makes sense to, since we've already started this process and got approved by the HPC, to just continue through what's going to approve it.
I would say to Dana's point, maybe you don't want to start that clock, or maybe it's Jane's, maybe you don't want to start that clock quite yet in terms of the COA. But I have a couple of thoughts on this, and I'd like to express them. Number one, we did a very nice cooperative project with Melanzana a couple of years ago in terms of the sidewalk, the drainage off the roof, running the drain into the sewer system, worked out beautifully. We shared costs and this and things like that. We would be, I know the street department would be perfectly willing to enter into that same kind of a project with you. The second thing I would say is, you know, Max was asking about the TIF funds. And as I said, TIF funds are, at our next URA meeting, I would like for us to know to a certainty what that application process is. And maybe this is a perfect opportunity to hand that off to Heather and say, here's apply, please apply to us. Because we don't actually have to have money available at that moment to help somebody. We can give them a certificate that guarantees a certain amount of money against TIF funds over X amount of time. Let's just say 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. They can take that certificate to the bank. And that can be syndicated at a bank. And then the numbers I've always heard are 85%, although I just heard a syndication number of 91% just the other day from the Tabor Opera House. And so we could make funds available under TIF sooner rather than later. I just have to make sure that my understanding of this process is correct and that we can issue the application for TIF to someone and that we can be helpful now rather than 2 or 3 years from now. So I'm sorry, I've digressed, but it really gets my mind working in a lot of different directions. So it's your decision whether we continue with the COA tonight.
Look, I have one question.
Please.
Can they alter the COA if we continue it?
Alter it how?
Just
amend
in
it?
terms of projects that they can undertake,
So adding some
Adding or
things that maybe they
adding or
didn't put in.
subtracting.
Yeah, or, oh, okay,
projects.
we got a grant for this, so we no longer need this, but we would like to add this. So is that an option?
If it was something that's already included in the COA that the HPC has approved, and it just, say for instance, the HPC approved 4 different projects for this particular building, and she's just wanting to do one, but it was included in that original to the HPC, then you as council could just approve that one. But if you were bringing something completely different than what the HPC approved, then that would have to go back to the HPC, if that makes sense.
I would say this, the sidewalk work and the work under the sidewalk, you know, on building foundation things, does not require a certificate of authenticity.
Appropriate.
Appropriate. Thank you. Keep me posted,
I'll keep you authentic.
Can I interrupt on that?
please.
Depending on what funds are available, will also determine how extensive we get with the sidewalk project. So if we can do what we would really love to do, and re-expose the windows and door that still exists coming out of the basement.
Oh, down in the basement,
That
yeah.
definitely will affect what it looks like, but it will make it look more like it originally did.
Okay.
You know, whether that fits into. what-
I didn't realize that you had actually a window and door still down there
There's
that
still
were part of the
down
original
there,
building.
it's open, it's required.
Okay. And that might require the certificate.
Mayor, if I may, I think that if they were going to specifically stay within the parameters of what has been proposed in this certificate of appropriateness, I feel that we should go through with it. That said, I don't know if amending or having 2 certificate of appropriatenesses, I mean, I think that having one for the robust project, they're gonna have to come back. I think this is about pointing the bricks, not redoing the structural integrity of that northwest corner. If that's their priority, and that's the need to do, and then some of the things that are in here, the nice to do's because of the grant, perhaps having it so the time clock starts when they actually get their building, you know, they have one COA and one building permit that they go forward. Not against the work that the Historic Preservation Commission did, the application that the applicant submitted. I just think that one and done is better than 2 staggered, is my thought process.
And the other possibility is, you know, it's a 2-year process, but they can request an extension on 2 years too. So my question is this, and you may or may not know the answer to this. This was the Open for Business grant. And I thought that grant was just facade. So was that grant applicable to that work
It was.
in the basement?
It was facade and efficiency.
Yep.
And was there safety in there as well?
Facade and energy improvements.
So would it have been applicable to the basement project? I guess is
That
the question.
was questionable. We
Okay.
thought we would throw that in there because, and then
Gotcha.
lining on the facade doesn't make much sense if the back corner of the building falls out. So we thought we would try to put that in there and see, and maybe it didn't like that, perhaps that's what I would.
To Councilmember Forgensi's suggestion, would you be okay with us going through with this tonight?
Yeah, I would be okay with going through with it. Feels like it'll sort of kickstart the process. I'm not sure what the process would be for the extension on that time. Is that pretty simple?
It's pretty simple. It's just a request to city council for an extension.
We really would like to see it detailed anyway with some engineers and some drawing proper plans. So I think maybe.
I have one more question you may or may not know the answer to. When is the next time you could apply for this grant?
There is none.
There's what?
There is none. This is, there are no further grants available at this time.
Okay.
They had $43 million in requests and they had $4 million to do it.
Oh,
So it
Hmm.
wasn't because of it wasn't, had nothing to do, by the way, with our application. It was fully, it was just a lack of enough money to go around. So we did get the Herald Democrat, as you all know.
Gotcha.
And these other two, we were forced to submit separately in a separate application, which competed with all the rest of the other municipalities. So sadly, it was a supply and demand issue.
Thank you very much. Heather, is there anything else you'd like to speak to in this application before we? Okay, all right, thank you. I would like to hear from staff, please.
It's the Anheuser-Busch building. Also, I did want to point out, it does date back to 1895. One of the most, our Leadville Historic Resources Survey, the phase 1 intensive level that was done in 2017. They said construction in 1895 of the Anheuser-Busch building, it is individually eligible and contributing to the district. And it said, this building retains a very high degree of integrity in all aspects, particularly design and materials. Photographs from the 1890s indicate that the building's storefront was never greatly altered over the years. It would be eligible individually as well as contributing to the NHL district.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to ask if there's anybody in the public who would like to speak in favor of this certificate. Seeing none, I'd like to ask if there's anybody who would like to speak in opposition to this certificate. Still none. I would entertain a motion to close the public input portion of the public hearing.
Art moves to close the public input portion of the public meeting.
Still second. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? At this time, we are in deliberation. If City Council has any questions for the applicant or staff, this would be the time. Come up to the microphone.
Before finding out who I would talk to about being a guinea pig for it.
That's a great question. Right this second, we're rethinking the organization of the Urban Renewal Authority. Please come to me directly with that. And at the next meeting, we're going to choose a new chair and vice chair and kind of restructure the Urban Renewal Authority. And we're also, we have a lot of discussions in the URA. One is, do we have anybody administering the URA in the future? But right this second, please bring that to me, and I'm going to follow up at the next URA meeting about getting an application that we can use. Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant or staff? Hearing none, would somebody like to make a motion?
Bill moves to approve the certificate of appropriateness for the renovation of 225 Harrison Avenue, Leadville, Colorado 80461, based on the criteria set forth in the related COA application materials and staff report dated September 28, 2021. City of Leadville's Municipal Code, sections 17.44 and the 2015 Leadville Comprehensive Plan.
Going seconds.
No. Cisco gets this one. We have any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Larissa.
Yes.
Councilmember Hill.
Yes.
Mayor Lobby.
Yes.
Councilmember Gowing.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Green.
Yes.
Councilmember Forgensi.
Yes.
Councilmember Tharp.
Yes.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. I have to say that I so appreciate anybody in our city who's willing to take these buildings, whether it's homes or these old businesses, and rehabilitate them. It's thrilling to watch. So thank you very much. At this time, we have completed the third public hearing, and at which time this public hearing process is closed at 7:15. Okay. Next up, we have a TUP for Trick or Treat Street. Anybody still awake over there on Zoom?
With us, Amber?
I'm here.
Hi, Amber. Would you just give us a quick overview of Trick or Treat Street?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Barely. We need a little more volume. Oh, Nancy. Amber, we also have Nancy up here at the podium. Which of you would like to speak first? Amber's going first.
Yeah, I can't figure out how to turn up my volume. So Nancy can fill in the blanks if you can't hear me.
No, we can hear you fine now.
Okay, great. So as we put in the application, we are proposing to move what was Trunk or Treat, which is a drive-through event at Community Park Field, onto Harrison Avenue this year and host it as an in-person event. Nancy and the Main Street folks have been kind enough to volunteer to partner with us on this, so we're really excited about that. We want to involve the local businesses, and then all of the organizations that volunteered last year will be stationed at Zeitz or on the courthouse lawn. And then we're also inviting like other residents and organizations that are interested in handing out candy to sign up and participate as well. So the intent is to use both sides of Harrison between 3rd and 7th. We talked a little bit about some safety stuff since the last meeting. So we're hoping to have folks walk in one clockwise direction to minimize crossing. Obviously to use appropriate crosswalks. And then we'd like to have some roving crosswalk hosts, which will likely be Nancy and I, to make sure folks are crossing appropriately. And then we'll have some signage up as well. And yeah, I think other than that, we haven't really made many changes. So I'm happy to answer questions, or Nancy, if you have anything that you want to share.
I think you got it covered. I was trying to think, did she have anything else that we missed? No, other than the fact that on the application there, I think I reviewed it, and it was something along the lines of having maybe the police department kind of flag each side of Harrison coming in and out, just to warn people that there's an event, some type of special event to kind of slow people down. I think that was another thing that we missed, Amber.
Yeah, I did add that. Thank you.
I'm not quite sure how we do that. Trying to think of a way to let people know there's an event going on. I might have to give that some thought and conversation with the police department.
They did also wonder if the street department might have any portable signs that could be placed on the route to, again, bring awareness to the event. I'm not sure what kind of signs they were referring to, but
Do we,
slow, I really don't know.
do we have event in progress signs?
I don't know that we, I don't know that we do. The county, I think the county does, and I believe that Lifetime Fitness might.
I was
You know,
gonna
we could ask
suggest
them.
contacting them and see if they have
Yeah.
any signage like that.
The
The other thing I would like to ask is what was the motivation to move Trick or Treat Street from 7th Street onto Harrison Avenue?
Yeah, so I think for us, like there wasn't really a driver for 7th Street, and we felt like organizing trick-or-treating for a particular neighborhood wasn't really part of our mission as the recreation department. And I think, I don't want to speak for Nancy, but I think Main Street feels like a better fit with her organization and their mission. So an opportunity where we could invite other community organizations and community members that don't live on 7th to participate just felt like the best fit from a recreation perspective, and Nancy can speak to that on her end. But we're definitely
you know, we really want to encourage, if there is someone who lives on 7th that still wants to host that traditional trick or treat street, like, we think that's great as well. So if there's a driver for that, that's fantastic.
I'll add a couple things too. We did, Main Street Board went around to all 7th Street residents and kind of polled everybody. And although we did get favorable response, most people they just didn't want any celebration to go away. I think that was the biggest point. Like, we don't care where it is, just, we really like it on 7th Street, but if it needs to move and transition into something better and bigger, so the rest of our community can be a part, we're totally open to that. So I think that's what kind of graduated the idea into this. And Amber and the county rec department and I were in this unique position because they didn't want to focus on one particular neighborhood being in the rec department, and Main Street was kind of hard to manage an event not on Main Street, right? So although it was in boundaries. So we thought, if for nothing else, we can still chalk this up to a COVID, mulligan year. And if this doesn't go well, we'll go back to what we were doing and what worked well in years past. But we thought we'd try something different. It was an exciting partnership with the rec department, also an opportunity for our community partners like Get Outdoors Leadville, Full Circle, and many others to come down and participate, even if they don't have presence right on Main Street.
Thank you. Any questions for either Amber or Nancy?
Who used to organize the 7th Street trick or treat?
So I know there's been some confusion about that. I know it was mentioned once that it was Main Street. It technically never was really Main Street. It was a gal, if I'm not mistaken, because I asked this question after our last council meeting about this, and because I want to make sure that we're covering everything we need to. But it has kind of, from what I understand, Amber, you can chime in, it sort of has played a hot potato. I think it just was, and without the haunted house, I guess that was hosted on 7th Street, without that, in the absence of the haunted house, it kind of, was falling flat, and there was some talk about doing something different.
Yeah, Cisco, it's been historically a community volunteer, and that last person was Bethany Maher. So I think there was some confusion about, she was doing that on her own. It was not part of her role as Main Streets, but I think there was a little confusion there. And I honestly don't know who organized it before her.
I would say this, I don't think it's an either or proposition. To Tim's point, somebody on 7th Street wants to do that. I mean, the beauty of 7th Street was you blocked off 2 blocks, and it was so incredibly easy for the kids and families to roam around 7th Street. Downtown, it sounds like you have your ducks in a row in terms of the safety of the kids on Harrison Avenue. I can try and get some event in progress signs. I'll work on that and talk to the police department. I mean, I love that you guys are doing this. This is fantastic. And I would also love it if somebody on 7th Street wanted to organize that. So I think it's a different organizational ask of us.
I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the time frame. So we purposely, Amber was very smart in moving this up from 1 to 5 p.m. so that you can continue your evening activities with your older kids or younger kids. And I know that there are several people on 7th Street that are planning to participate regardless.
Gotcha. Any other questions for the applicants?
I have a question, Nancy. So I'm reading and so they talk about the location. So what does it actually look like? Are the kids gonna trick or treat at each of the businesses, or are the treats gonna be focused on Zeitz Park, the Lifetime series, or the courthouse lawn? Yeah, how does that?
All of the above.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're getting business participation. We're starting to make those lists now in terms of who will be handing out what. And so we're doing that on Main Street, and then rec department is handling all the partnerships with all the nonprofit organizations and other groups like sheriff department and fire department and the college, because I know a lot of people wanted to come down and pass out candy. So which is what inspired us to kind of expand this event.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lauritsen has a comment.
Please, Tracy.
Hi, thank you. I guess I have a couple of comments. My first one is, if I was a kid, I don't want to trick or treat in the middle of the afternoon. And you're asking that businesses to accommodate trick or treat along with regular customers. And I don't see how that's safer in terms of COVID. Also, if somebody does come forward to do trick or treat street, are we willing to cough up another $500 to accommodate that for 7th Street?
Good question. Well, we won't know that until somebody comes and asks us.
So Tracy, I mean, Nancy can speak to this more, but she's already getting really positive feedback from the businesses and they're excited to participate. It's not mandatory. We are planning to put up signage showing which businesses are participating so people know where to stop and where not to stop. The other piece is that we got really good feedback on the time of trunk or treat last year. It was in the same window of time. And we got really good feedback also from your law enforcement folks saying, this is a good time of day. It's great to not be out here in the dark, running around, chasing kids, trying to keep folks safe. So again, I think folks are more than willing to go out at night if they want to go out at night. It's just not, that is not what we are hosting. We're also, you know, Pumpkin Patch has been canceled for the younger set. So I think that this is a more appropriate time of day to send those kids out as well, in lieu of that happening. And yeah, I mean, I think I can't speak on the donation piece, but it feels really late for somebody to step forward and say, we're going to organize 7th Street. I think that that would have happened by now if it was going to happen. But I obviously can't speak for the folks that live on that block. But
Anything else, Tracy?
No, I think I don't like it. I think 7th Street would be better, but that's just my opinion.
Let's hope somebody from 7th Street comes and wants to do exactly that. That would be okay with me. Any other questions for the applicants or concerns? Max, you had a concern about the safety of crossing Harrison Avenue. Has that been answered to your satisfaction?
I was actually going to bring that up after, because it's not necessarily to the applicant or this particular this event. I feel it, and I'm going to try to make my comments as concise as possible. We've had a couple of parades that perhaps I would say haven't been the safest or the best experience for our guests in our community. And I hope that this goes out without a hitch, and it is a great experience for our community as well. I do feel that perhaps the street department, if we can, I think we need to figure out what the engineering controls are to make it so people are informed, number one, and number two, that we have engineering controls in place so we can actually close down Harrison Ave. And this has nothing against you or your application, it's just in general. So we can put up barriers, so we can actually have a safe event that is free from oncoming traffic or that. But to this point about the safety, I know Luke Finken brought up don't block the trapezoid, don't block the trapezoid. I actually think that's a great idea. I don't think we're going to be able to get something out there with neon green trapezoid colors out there. But I think that's yet another thing that we have to work on, is getting those signs up that say yield to pedestrians in our crosswalks, and making sure that perhaps if people aren't doing it, that they're enforced. And we have people that are, I mean, we truly have to think, if this is our historic downtown and we want to have safe experiences for our community and our guests, that we have to invest in that kind of engineering controls and safety measures to do so. And if we can get a varial message board and say, event in progress, watch out for, please go slow or whatever on both sides. I just think that we need to have the vehicles understand that there's going to be a bunch of kids on sugar running around with their heads cut off in weird costumes that they might not be able to see very well out of, and all jazzed up, right? Running to and from and trying to get to the next street or catching up with their buddies who just crossed the street beforehand. So I think we can do something if we can bolster that and bring awareness to the people that are driving through. And also, I mean, we got to see how it works. So I am also for having this on Main Street this year, and if somebody comes from 7th Street as well. But we got to see if it works or not.
Thank you. We have done both in years past.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, I'm not thrilled about this. I don't like the idea of mixing the business corridor with a trick or treat theme. And on my limited experience with small groups of kids, like 7th Street has really had the crowds, and then people sort of pitter out as they go down the main street in past years. So I'm a little concerned about having those crowds moved on to Harrison. I do think the daytime timing is a good thing, because I know some of the street crossings I've seen in past years are sort of harrowing after dark. So maybe some of that will be mitigated by the daytime. So I am not thrilled by it, but I also don't see a reason to say no to it.
Anybody else?
Really thankful to the rec department and Main Street for putting something together for our kids in our community, because obviously if you didn't, no one is. So that's a fun time for most of our community and kids. I just loved how 7th Street was so contained and safe. So a similar, like, I feel a little bit of fear around the Harrison component. I would just really want to emphasize that, like, these crossing guards are on point and focused, and that is part of the plan. And yeah, the more signage, the better. And I do agree that it's a good thing to try. And I think I noticed in some Facebook threads and just community discussion, people were kind of bewildered by how 7th Street used to happen and who does it and everything. So perhaps we could help spread that word for future years about that needs to be a community-wide effort, or invite someone to kind of take that role on or something, so that we could kind of empower that to continue as well.
I'm sorry. Hang on a second. Is there anybody else in city council?
I have one more thing I'd like to say. Yeah.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I would like the motion to include that there's a crossing person at every intersection with a sign or something that forces cars to stop if children are crossing. Not just 2 people, every intersection should have a crossing guard.
Thank you. Christy, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just am wearing my Tree of Sharing hat, and I would like to share with you what it looks like to be a community-led organization. It's a big burden, and I doubt that you're going to be, it's not going to be easy to get someone to take something like this on. It takes a lot of thought, and it's not pain, right? And there's always haters. and you take time away from your family to do this, and yes, you get the warm and fuzzies because you do this thing, but I think that you guys, I really love seeing that Main Street and Recreation is taking this on, and I think as a community, we need to realize that the people who have been doing these things for our community for 10, 15, 20, 30 years with boom days and stuff like that, we're getting tired. and we need support, or we're not going to be able to continue to do the things that make Lake County what they
Thank you, Kristen. Any other final thoughts?
I would also, as far as city assistance, I would appreciate, Mayor, if you could talk with the street department, with Tommy, and see what see what they can come up with for signage if, so making sure that the stop for pedestrian are, at the cross areas and stuff.
Those are already in downtown.
But I mean,
Yeah.
usually they don't have them in the winter, and I don't know, depending on the
Right, they
weather,
don't.
just make sure that they are there
Okay.
and present, as well as if we want to see if there are any event in process signs that, could be used. But if you could talk with Tommy in the street department, see how we can help on the city side for, the Main Street folks, and recreation with the event.
All right, I'll check with the street department on signs. I'll check with Leadville Trail 100
Great,
on
thank you.
signs. I'm going to check with CDOT because they have a lighted event board. It just is a matter of whether it's available or not. I will check with CDOT and see if they can make that available.
When we had didn't we have those mass required signs, lit up signs coming in on each side? Did we use those?
Oh,
Remember?
the signs, like when you get that, when we were give shots, or we had COVID mask. I know what you're, the big billboard things that are the live, yeah, we do have those, do we not,
Message
Mayor?
boards.
So those CDOTs,
Those are CDOTs. We don't have them.
we don't have any.
No, the county doesn't either.
CDOT more than likely will help you as long as there isn't a closure or something.
I would agree.
emerging.
They tend to be pretty helpful. Floyd's great, so. Okay. All right, got my work out. So. Any other thoughts, concerns before we hear a motion?
I just want to say this because I am concerned about Tracy's request that the motion require a volunteer on every corner. I am not sure that's feasible. And so, Nancy and I will do our best to find as many folks to stand on as many corners as we can. But if we don't meet that requirement, I don't think it's feasible to do all this legwork and then cancel the event at the last minute. So I don't feel comfortable promising that we can make that happen unless Nancy feels like we can promise that. So I would say we will do our best to find as many crosswalk hosts as we can, but if that's a requirement, I'm not sure this can happen, to be completely honest with you.
Well, I would say this, I will volunteer.
It's the crosswalks. It's not every corner. It's-
I know.
I don't know. So what are we
It's
looking at?
It's still six, it's six
Yeah,
crosswalks. I was counting.
Okay, yeah.
No, but we could, the motion could encourage that as important to a kid's safety, something like that. It's up to the crafter of the motion. Would anybody like to make a motion?
You feel like you could confidently commit to 6 crossing guards? Okay.
I'll be one of somebody's agent.
When's the camera hit me up?
All right,
We were-
Councilman,
just so you know, our plan was to run, so we would have half a dozen runners, so we didn't have one person stuck at one street, so we would just kind of rotate. That was the plan. We didn't have 6 picked out per se, but I think we had, half that, but we can post it up a little bit. It's not a bad idea.
Councilmember Tharp motions to approve temporary use permit for Trick or Treat Street on Sunday, October 31st, 2021. With the amendment that a crossing guard at each intersection be required.
At each crosswalk.
At each crosswalk.
Agency seconds.
Is there any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
No,
Councilmember Hill,
Yes.
Mayor Lobby,
Yes.
Councilmember Gowing,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Green,
Yes.
Councilmember Forgensi,
Yes.
Councilmember Tharp.
Yes.
Thank you, and thanks for the thoughtful conversation for city council. Think we obviously want to have the safety of our kids in mind, but it's also, I'm buoyed by the fact that the downtown businesses are enthusiastic about doing this. And I think that makes a big difference to me. So thank you very much. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have an ordinance. This is ordinance number 9, series 2021. So, and this is second reading of this ordinance. So this will be a public meeting process. Just, you know, second readings are public meetings and also can accept changes at second reading. So we will go through the process at this time. As I said, the next item on the agenda is ordinance number 9, series of 2021, ordinance conditionally approving a planned unit development overlay district zoning for certain land known as Rail Yard Leadville Phase 2, and amending the official zoning map of the city, which council is considering on second reading. City Council adopted this ordinance on first reading on August the 10th, 2021. This ordinance was continued for second reading from September the 14th, 2021, because of additional information that was being researched for the condition of approval regarding affordable housing and deed restrictions from first reading of the ordinance. Not sure to put this together, but it's a little tough. Because this is second and final reading of the ordinance, the City Council will follow these steps. First, I will ask city staff to give any presentation or provide any information that they have to City Council about the ordinance. City Council will have the chance to ask questions of staff and have discussions with staff during the staff presentation. Next, I will invite the public to provide any comments on the ordinance that they would like City Council to consider. Any member of the public who wishes to speak on the ordinance may speak one at a time, and each person will have no more than 3 minutes to comment. Finally, council will discuss and vote on the ordinance. At this time, will staff make their presentation, please? Christiana?
Hi, City Council. This is the ordinance that you all approved, as you know, for the PUD district zoning for phase 2 of Rail Yard Leadville. You can see the specific portion of the rail yard development that will have this zoning in figure 1 in the council communication form. That's on page 2 of 3. It's that middle piece. It doesn't apply to that other outlot that you all subdivided or approved for subdivision. And ultimately, it sounded like the rail yard was going to sell off that other part of the lot, but so this is just for the phase 2 parcel. There were a number of conditions that you approved on first reading, including maximum building height standards for Highway 24, changes to those, some changes to fast food drive-ups. And the really big one was deed restrictions, or imposing a condition regarding deed restrictions for at least 5 units in phase 2. Since first reading, I believe the mayor, well, the mayor and I have been in communication, and I think the mayor has communicated with John to get John Lichtenegger's mutual agreement regarding that, instead of having this be a unilaterally imposed condition by City Council. And so with John's agreement, and I will follow up with a question to the mayor about a letter that hopefully John has signed showing his agreement, that phase 2, he agrees to the deed restrictions for at least 5 properties in phase 2, and with the caveat that Mr. Lichtenegger would like those deed restrictions to be removed or not enforced or not imposed if those properties aren't developed within 5 years of, it would be within 5 years of the land use agreement, or the development agreement, excuse me, that the city enters into with High Country developers. And that is just kind of an overview. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Christiana?
Yes, I have a question about that last point, which rubs me completely the wrong way. In section H, there, it talks about that the developer and the city mutually agree to enter this development agreement for the 5 dwelling units, yada, yada, but there's no mention in section 8 about a 5-year limitation.
Yeah, that would be, Mayor, before I go to your question, Mayor, did John sign that letter?
He has agreed to sign it. He has it in hand right now. He's supposed to get it back to me tomorrow, but he has agreed to sign it.
Okay.
But that was based on having the 5-year caveat in there. He just didn't want those pieces of land in perpetuity to be sitting there if they're not going to be developed.
So that's.
Isn't it up to him to develop them?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, then how does that agreement work?
What we would do is not unlike what we're going to do with the parcels being given to the URA, then we will have the ability to RFP those 5 lots for development by a developer under a deed restriction.
Could we require that if 5 years pass and it's not developed, that land goes to the city?
No. That would be a taking. So the way that the deed restrictions would work is, so what the ordinance requires is that High Country developers, when they submit their next land development application, most likely that would be a major subdivision application. At that point, they would enter into a development agreement with the city, and the development agreement would operate to establish those deed restrictions on a certain number of properties, as stated in the ordinance. And those deed restrictions kind of operate like an easement would almost. So if you understand how an easement works, it's a restriction or a limitation on the property that runs with the land. It doesn't matter who owns it. And so that those deed restrictions would run with the land for those properties, no matter who owns them. They would be deed restricted to those affordable housing, buying and selling restrictions for a while. And then if they're just not developed within 5 years of the development agreement, then the deed restrictions would be lifted. And you're right, the ordinance doesn't note the 5-year caveat. It notes the very minimum requirement that it would be 5 dwelling units or 5 properties that would be subject to these deed restrictions. And the letter of agreement from High Country developers is what has the 5-year time limit in it. And we would just have to make sure that when we do the development agreement, we have the 5 units and the 5 years, a 5-year deed restriction removal if they're not developed, that condition in there as well.
Christiana, when does that 5-year period start?
It would most likely it would start when we enter into the land development agreement, right? So whenever, again, this development agreement would be something that is done in conjunction with High Country developers application, land use application for probably a major subdivision. And so within that process, we would also, or in conjunction with that process, we would also enter into this development agreement. And the effective date of the development agreement would likely start the 5-year clock. Though that is up to, that would be a point of negotiation that we could have if that time clock for the deed restrictions is the start date of that. We could push it out, but that's something that we would have to negotiate at that time.
Christiana, if this ordinance passes, does that lock us into that 5 years, or because it's on a letter, does that remain open to negotiation?
It remains open to negotiation because it's just in the letter and not in the ordinance.
I still don't like it.
I have a question. Sorry.
She barked.
I don't know how to answer that.
I got 3 dogs in here all of a sudden. Hey, Alex, Alex. Shh. Okay, my question is the term deed restricted also mean workforce or affordable housing? Because I don't see that wording in here anywhere. And I think that was the intent, was to have 5 lots of affordable or workforce housing.
The deed restrictions were, from my memory, the deed restrictions were related to income and area median income. And we were saying that it's, or city council was saying that you all wanted it to be consistent with community guidelines that were hopefully adopted by the time that High Country Developers submits their next application. So I think that the deed restrictions, one of the purposes of leaving this a little more open in the ordinance is so that we do have room to negotiate and to, you know, if we're talking about workforce housing, then that could be a deed restriction. If we're talking about affordable housing, that could be a deed restriction. We, you know, however specific we get would be in the development agreement and subject to future negotiations. And this is just kind of setting the bare minimum for what you know, the city is establishing here.
Well, but doesn't, I mean, you can have an expensive house that sells and is deed restricted. I don't think that was our intent. Our intent is to have 5 lots that are affordable.
I believe that the community
Wait, I'm not done yet.
Yep.
If affordable means that it's deed restricted, that's a separate issue. But the main issue is that they should be affordable or workforce housing.
And I think that the deed restriction is just the mechanism to accomplish that.
But that's not in the ordinance as written.
But it leaves the deed restriction up to us, not the developer. And that's the beauty of it.
That's not what I'm reading though. I'm reading, you could sell his $500,000 townhouse as deed restricted, but that's not affordable.
It has to be, the deed restrictions have to be approved by the city. That's what the ordinance says. And so that was trying to, again, encompass the intent that it would be affordable housing and that the city would have to approve those deed restrictions, whatever they may be, before with this development agreement.
Yeah, I would also say that the Housing Coalition is currently working on the community guidelines, which would be the form that the deed restrictions would take. And they could include a lot of things. They could include income limits. They could include residency. They could include AMI thresholds for the pricing of those homes. So they will likely be all of those things.
Will the deed restrictions be different for every parcel or across the whole city?
I would assume that they're going to be the same for all 5 parcels. In other words, those community guidelines are going to be applicable to those 5 parcels in this development.
Right.
Mayor, if I may, I would just like to say to, you know, the entire council and then also to our community members, how proud we should be on what we've done so far when it comes to affordable housing and our housing crisis here in Lake County and Leadville. Is we have a short-term rental cap. That's awesome. We have a piece of property that was deeded to us by High Country Developers for some sort of attainable, affordable, deed restricted, whatever you want to call it, workforce housing, which is fantastic. We have an excise tax that's going to be on our ballot that we voted to get on our ballot. That's fantastic as well. This giant ship that's called real estate and money and this, we are slowly being able to turn it 1 degree at a time, and we're kind of slowly turning the ship. Personally, I feel that with phase 1, we missed an opportunity for deed-restricted housing. I understand he has to make money. He is a developer. That's what developers do. They make money, they build homes, right? No deed-restricted homes in that first phase. Second phase, I personally think that we sold ourselves short. Five deed-restricted homes, or at least 5 as the ordinance written now, with a letter of agreement or something like that, which I am not a favor of whatsoever. We are, the High Country Developers, their job is to be the 500-pound gorilla in the room, and we cannot let them bully them around, especially when this is at critical mass or a critical situation in our community. So we have to continue to turn the ship, and probably faster than we are, but we're at least gaining some momentum in that way. I would like to say also, being over in Summit County last week, there was some articles that were like 4 or 5 page articles in the Summit Daily, Vale Daily, all over the place about affordable housing. You know what? Leadville wasn't one of them that they talked about. It was every other, I think it was based on the actual periodical. I think it was whoever owns all those, Summit Daily, Vale Daily, Steamboat Pilot, but ultimately, I think we're doing the best. That's just me personally. Now my head will tip over and hit the ground because we're filled with ego. However, I do feel we're doing the right thing, and we have to continue to advocate for our community when it comes to this. And that's that whole 2 minutes of soliloquy, however you want to say it, is that I like the fact that we have at least 5. We cannot cut ourselves short. This is not enough turn for deed restricted housing for our community. It's written that way. I'm just saying that we missed an opportunity to hold a developer to the fire in what is in other community members a much greater percentage for deed restricted housing across any of our surrounding counties, period. So I'd like to, I know we have to do this ordinance. It's not the letter, but I don't like the letter, Dana. Just saying.
Yeah, Christiana, does this letter have any legal anything, or is it just a written gentleman's agreement?
It's an agreement in writing from High Country Developers that they mutually agree to enter into a development agreement at a future time, like the ordinance says. And the city under state law can't unilaterally impose this condition. And so that's why we went back and were looking for a mutual agreement from High Country Developers to this. And that's where the letter came from, signed by, well, to be signed by John. And so if we don't get High Country Developers mutual agreement, then the city can't legally just unilaterally impose this condition. And so that's where this came from.
So the letter to some extent is necessary to satisfy the mutual agreement that's required because we can't dictate. So then in that case, my real concern is this 5-year limitation, given the cost of building materials and staff shortages and who knows what else is coming down. I mean, that seems like a really short time, and I don't see what would, I think if the city were taking responsibility for developing those and putting out RFPs, I think that's far too short. And if the developer were in charge of developing it, I don't see what would stop them from just dragging their feet until the 5 years is done. I don't trust them 1 cent. So I would want that to be changed before I really I mean, I have a number of issues with this ordinance. Amongst the many issues I have with this ordinance, that is one that I would like to see changed before I would vote for it.
So that is,
Like to see. I'm
that would
sorry.
have to be a negotiation point within the development agreement. Since, or you could continue this again. That is also an option. If you guys would like to, direct that as a council, direct that staff, the mayor, me, go back to High Country Developers and negotiate a longer timeframe before the deed restrictions would be lifted if the properties remain undeveloped. That's an option.
Wouldn't that be in the letter rather than the ordinance itself?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
Okay.
but right now, passing the ordinance, I think, is leverage to negotiating terms of the letter.
I
Yes.
agree. I think we should have the letter signed before we sign this ordinance.
And in terms of your question of what would I want,
Yeah.
I think, again, if the city is going to be part of this, and if we are working with government grants, we know how those can stretch things out, I would say at least 10 years.
Okay.
And I'm sort of making that up, but
No,
but it gives,
at
it
least
makes,
it's a number. What does everybody
it
else
makes
think?
my stomach unclench a little.
Yeah, I'm a federal employee. I can say 10 years.
Christiana, what would you think about that?
I think that it is a negotiation, and if you guys want to go for 10 years, then let's go for it.
Okay.
10 and 10.
So
I'm just inclined to say if we don't have something up there about 5 years, then somebody's doing something wrong.
Well, that was my thought process too, but I also.
Because
think
this needs to happen before 5 years from now or 10
Yeah,
years.
I
from
would
now.
agree, but I don't see any real problem with putting 10 years in there either. I don't think it hurts anything to give ourselves more leeway and, to the point of, contractors, materials, government grants, all these different things. We know they take way longer than we ever expect. So I actually like the thought process around 5 years, maybe a little bit tighter than maybe we would want.
And,
But-
or
but-
another approach too, you could do the 5 with an automatic extension of 5 more years. I mean, it just, and I don't know, it may.
I like the 10 years, it's
just do
cleaner.
10 years, yeah.
Okay, that's it for me. To Christiana's point, what she's trying to get that agreement in writing, that he's going to agree to that in the development agreement and not depend on the ordinance.
But what does he have if we pass the ordinance, what impetus does he have to keep on track with negotiating on a letter
In good faith.
in good faith?
Christiana, it's a question. I'm not sure I quite understand where we're going with that question, but what do you think?
So the question is what essentially what leverage or what motivation or requirement or something along those lines would High Country Developers have to stick to what they say in the letter?
No, if we're still negotiating the letter, a signed letter, my understanding is it doesn't mean a whole lot without the ordinance. But if we vote on the ordinance and pass it, I think what that does is take away some of our leverage for negotiating what we would like him to sign in the letter.
Potentially, yeah. I agree with that.
Okay, I mean, I think it's an awfully good point. We want to keep the leverage in play. I would also say that the letter then and the ordinance together, when we go to the development agreement, that he has to come to us, to okay what his plans are for the development. We're still in the driver's seat. That would be my assumption, Christiana. I don't know. What do you think?
The ordinance would require him, like you said, in conjunction with the letter, so that we clearly have that mutual agreement, then the ordinance would function to make that development agreement a requirement, and the ordinance also makes the deed restrictions that are in the development subject to the city's approval. So, yeah, you'd be in the driver's seat for those deed restrictions and those details.
Can we change the language so we say you could either choose from to at least 10 dwelling units within 5 years or 5 dwelling units within 10 years? I'm just saying, I mean,
You want
I'm
to put
just,
that in the ordinance?
no, I'm just saying, because right now it's a minimum of 5 dwelling units. I still feel that that's a small, that's like not even 5% of the entire amount of units between phase 1 and phase 2 that's going to be deed restricted.
Remember, phase 1, we do have a piece of land that we think will be 8 units.
8
That's
units.
kind
Oh, yeah,
of the thought process.
I
in
keep
phase
forgetting
1.
about that, yeah.
And we negotiated the 5 units in phase 2. I'm not disagreeing with you. Maybe we should be more aggressive. Here's been my thought process all along. You know, the county went through this this consideration of inclusionary housing, inclusionary zoning a couple of years ago, and it went down in flames. And I think one of the reasons it did, and one of the arguments that was made, and I was just you know, a fly on the wall doing those things. We didn't have a dog in that fight, but I was very interested in the process. And what they talked about was, in some places, if you're building a housing development in Summit County, your return on investment is pretty assured. When you're building that same housing development in Leadville, it's not the same assurance of the return on investment. And that's just the way it's always been in this county. It's an unfortunate reality that we don't have the same power to draw and to sell as other counties. So I think that was part of the consideration is how far do you push that and push it to the point where a developer, any developer, can't pencil out what they're doing. And it's rhetorical in nature, you know. But I think that was a lot of the thought process behind why inclusionary zoning simply was considered unacceptable by the county.
So if the developer agreed to it, there could not be a time limit on this, right? If they agreed on it. And has he refused to agree on that, or have we asked him to agree to that?
I'll speak.
That's a
He
question for
used to
you,
agree.
Mayor.
He asked for the 5 years to be in that agreement. That's, you know, and Christian and I talked about it. We didn't see a problem with that. And so that's what's in the agreement now. Hasn't been signed. If we want to change it to 10 years, I not only don't have a problem with that, I would support that wholeheartedly because I think it makes more sense.
And just to consider all options, what if we propose not having an expiration on that? Because I do feel that that is more in the spirit of what we were trying to do, is make sure that those properties end up as attainable housing.
But to Tim's point, if we haven't done something in 5 years, we should probably be ashamed of ourselves. If we haven't done something in 10 years, it's criminal in my mind that we haven't done what is obvious that we need to do, and that is get affordable and attainable housing in place.
Well, I think if we do a 5-year, that holds our feet to the fire too, to get something done.
What is you're using we and what is our responsibility to and power to do that?
I think that's an awfully good question. I've given that some thought. You know, when we first crafted this ordinance, my thought that, oh, well, the developer will just develop it and he'll put these things in place and they'll be affordable and deed restricted and all that. I'm not sure the developer has that ability. I mean, there are organizations that do. Fading West has that ability. The Chafee Housing Trust has that ability. There are ways to do that. I just don't think the developer has the ability to do what we could do with that land.
I mean, if we are in a position to drive that, great. My worry is that we aren't. And it's up to the developer to drive. And if there's a 5-year expiration there, what's to keep them from sitting on it for 5 years and then selling it at market cost?
I mean, look at what we've gone through so far with Laura. And we're coming up with stuff at the end that should have been taken care of early on. I'm just saying. So,
I will say this, this is a classic example. I know that Dana has a distrust of the developer, but I would say everything he's done has been in good faith. And I'll give a classic example. That Laura parcel, he actually signed that over to the Urban Renewal Authority on January the 4th of this year. He didn't even hesitate. We didn't know he'd signed it over. You know, I'll put that at the feet of the people who are supposed to be taking care of it. But nonetheless, he did exactly what he was supposed to do when he was supposed to do it. And on our end, we didn't take care of business. So I would say that he has shown me no reason to believe that we should not trust his intent. So our options tonight are to pass this ordinance with the deed restrictions in it, and then negotiate either a 10-year or maybe not have an end date on that agreement. We can let city council decide what we want to advise Christiana on either of those cases.
I don't think we should pass the ordinance till we have a signed agreement.
Okay.
I kind of concur with that notion. I'd feel a lot more comfortable with the signed letter before going through passing the ordinance.
Okay, then what would, then we can continue this ordinance. And then, so we have to give Christiana, a negotiating stance in terms of, is it going to be 10 years? Is there going to be no limitation in there? What do we want Christiana to put in that letter? Tracy says 10. I would agree with 10. Dana?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think you ask for what we want. And I think no limitation would be ideal, although perhaps not necessary. So maybe we start with that. And then if he objects, fall back on 10. And look how agreeable we are and negotiable.
Jane?
We're so accommodating.
I like the way you
yes, we're so
negotiate.
accommodating. I would agree with Dana.
Okay,
I would advocate for no time limit.
okay, Jim?
I like the approach. You can start with no time limit and take it from there.
Then 10 would be our fallback position.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Max?
Agreed.
Thank you. Christiana, how does that sound to you?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, we're going to have to continue this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And Christiana, could we have the letter, the agreement signed before this comes, the
Right.
ordinance comes again?
Yeah,
I mean, we'll have we know what we're gonna negotiate for, but instead of, oh, well, he's going to sign it. I think what I'm hearing
Well,
from council
even
is
if-
we
even if
all
he-
want it.
Even if you had signed that
Signed.
agreement, it sounds like it would have made no difference.
Well,
Even if you had signed that agreement, we wouldn't have accepted that, right?
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
so,
Well, I would have voted no.
yeah.
Well, there we
I
go.
do think
So there you have it.
I do think it makes sense to have a signed letter
Yeah.
that comports with city council's direction, whether that's the no time limit or the 10 years. Signed and potentially in the packet with the ordinance. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Then I would entertain a motion to continue ordinance 9, series 2021 to the October 19th city council meeting.
We move to continue the second reading of ordinance 9, series of 2021 to a date certain of the October 19th city council, regular city council meeting.
Do I have a second?
Pugensi seconds.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Tharp,
Yes.
Councilmember for Genesee,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Green,
Yes.
Councilmember Gowing,
Yes.
Mayor Lobby,
Yes.
Councilmember Hill,
Yes.
Councilmember Larissa.
Yes,
Thank you all very much. Christiana, if you would prepare 2 letters for each of those contingencies, you and I will discuss how and when we present the first letter without the second letter under the table, and just see how that conversation goes. But I think when that happens, I would like for you to be attended, probably on Zoom. Is that okay?
That sounds good, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, I have a few questions.
Hang on just a second. Okay, any other comments before we move on? Then Christie, make it quick, please.
Yeah, I will. Christiana, I have a couple of questions. I heard you say that the city is not in a position to enforce that. That's why this letter is in play. Is that because there is not an inclusionary or linkage policy in place?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing the question, I'm afraid.
Is the reason the city cannot enforce this ordinance and therefore is required to do the letter because we do not have an inclusionary or linkage policy in place?
If the city had an ordinance requiring certain affordable housing development guidelines or something of that nature, or if those community guidelines that are in the process of being drafted were adopted as a city ordinance or a city policy, then that would affect it, yes. But because the city doesn't have anything like that in place, just unilaterally imposing this condition of deed restrictions isn't allowed under state law.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to see what I can do to help you guys not go through this again because it's painful. And then the second comment that I had when I made the recommendation that you guys and P&Z considered deed restriction, it was that the developer build it because you guys are giving him a benefit. In exchange, you should ask that he create the deed restriction. I understand Greg has concerns about that, and that is why the county is considering pursuing a nexus study so that we can find out what the appropriate ask of a developer is. And that nexus study would inform an inclusionary or a linkage policy.
Thank you, Christie.
Yeah.
And thanks for all the work the Housing Coalition does, because
Oh, yeah.
your body of knowledge, we spend a lot of time flying by the seat of our pants. We know that. It is the nature of being a small community in a modern world that would just love to eat us alive. So enough out of me. Next up, we have resolution number 17, series 2021. This is a resolution supporting Lake County's planning grant application to the Department of Local Affairs and authorizing a financial contribution towards the required match for such grant. Hi, Michael.
Hello, I am Michael Bierman. I'm with the Southern Colorado Economic Development District. I did come and present to the City Council the said comprehensive economic development strategy. And I will report that was turned in on September 30th to the federal government. And we did include the city's projects, policies, and programs. So good news is with the money raining down to the feds, the projects were included and you guys will be eligible like federal grants for the next 5 years. And that has taken a lot of my time. But the good news is that is behind me. And the great news is that we have what's in front of us today, which is the Door Planning Grant, which outlines a bunch of extra work for me to assist Lake County and the city of Leadville on all of these important housing developments that you guys have just been discussing. I'm going to try not to muddy the waters. So if you would spare me, I will directly with the resolution and have you guys take action on that. And then I would like to talk about next steps because there are some budgetary discussions that I think the council needs to be aware of moving into 2022 in relation to basically a parallel process, which is outlined in the planning grant, but also being ready to start to utilize public assets for development, especially some of the land that the county owns, process that I want to pitch to try to get that moving. And there's a reason that it wasn't included in the grant, and I'll get to that. So again, I'm trying not to muddy the waters here and keeping on task with the agenda. So first and foremost, we being the Lake County applied as the applicant for a dual planning grant. This grant is actually basically a two-step grant. The idea being that the planning funds set you as a municipality and a county up to adopt strategies that promote affordable housing. And then the big eye on the prize is that there's up to $1 million DOLA grant next fall that becomes available for communities that adopt at least 3 strategies as outlined in the grant. And I think in the staff report that you have in front of you, I outlined the different ones that we're potentially looking at. The total grant request was $65,000. It basically breaks down to $18,000 going to looking at publicly owned land ordinances, the disposal of publicly owned land, how you would potentially develop it, title work, which believe me, I have dealt with lots of title work with publicly owned lands in my career, and the disposal of that. Secondarily, there's 22,000 in there for assistance with the regional housing authority, the community guidelines, which have been discussed verbatim tonight, and also really looking at how the regional housing authorities is actually going to be structured and whether or not there needs to be an additional nonprofit, i.e. that if you get a land donation, which I think you guys have been discussing, how that company or whatever could realize tax incentives. And so that's a really big important piece of talking about how the formation of that is and whether or not you might partner with a nonprofit organization or whether or not it was actually created within that regional housing authority and governed by that. The 15,000 of that is to go towards a discussion with a potential IGA coming out of a talking Department of Water and the Leadville Sanitation District, talking about incentives that they can partner in, especially because the big piece of the puzzle coming out of this is potential infrastructure money, i.e. water, sewer, gas, and electric, making vertical construction ready in the second phase of this grant process. So seeing what we could talk about with initiating that, so having a mediated discussion, and then there's an additional 10 for codification of code amendments, and I think you can see the list in there that of things to consider. Not saying that we are going to, and I think that's really important about the planning grant, as DOLA does recognize that you are a municipal government and you have policy and procedures that you go through to adopting this code amendments. So that is the outline of the grant, and I want to leave it there because the request tonight is passing the resolution and the expenditure of $8,125 to match 50-50 with the county for that planning grant. It can be budgeted for 2022. That is a nice thing because the county has obligated the funds per the DOLA guidelines, so that will, and to be honest with you, by the time we actually start expenditure of funds here, that will be 2022. So that's a nice thing that the county has stepped up. So I'm going to leave it there, and then I'll get into SCED and what we're doing and next steps. But I want to make sure I just address it.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Number one, did this need to be in resolution? Is that a requirement of this grant?
So DOLA does require the applicant, which the county did, pass a resolution. I will tell you that we can go in and put this resolution once it's signed as part of the application. So it's currently under review. So that is a great thing. And it also solidifies your matching.
The relationship. And so with that, in your mind, that would make the application more powerful in terms of the relationship. Good, thank you.
We did get the letter supporting.
And the city was involved in the discussion about what is it we're applying for. And that was a great conversation between the city and county. So and then Michael and Christy really helped, kind of guide us through that process to get to a point where we could actually put it in an application. Really appreciate the county taking the lead on this. Any questions for Michael before we get on to the resolution itself? I was very interested that you feel like this could be $2022. So, okay.
Yeah, this is just a question. The DOLA grant for municipalities that adopt at least 3 of these things, like deed restriction. I think that's what Christie had been talking to us about initially, is that all part of that same House bill that got passed? There are like three
Yes.
different things in there.
Yeah.
And so we can apply, I guess my question is, it's okay to kind of tier those, you're not limited to just one.
No, I mean, it's planning, the ones that, the Department of Local Affairs with the planning funding, the planning grant funding, they really are trying to enable local government to adopt policies under the auspice of knowing that you are your own political entity and that you need to take public comment and passing ordinances. That the reason we wrote the grant to have a menu of options is knowing that not all of these might potentially.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was the importance of this, because I didn't want to limit, when we talked to the county, we didn't want to limit the county or the city to just three, right? We want to see a positive outcome, because we, again, eye on the prize, $1 million grant is really where the money's at, was really going to actually get units on the ground.
I would also say there are about 11 or 12 of those. We have 3 of them in play already. We're working on 3 more that I know of. We're talking about code changes and things in the policy advisory team. So we're moving in the direction, because the 3 is a minimum, but we need more than that in order to enable the housing that we want. Any other thoughts or questions about the resolution itself? Then I would entertain a motion on resolution number 27, series of 2021.
Dowling moves to adopt resolution number 27, series of 2021, a resolution supporting Lake County's planning grant application to the Department of Local Affairs and authorizing a financial contribution toward the required match for such planning grant.
Green seconds.
Is there any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Lobby,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Green,
Yes.
Councilmember Gowing,
Yes.
Councilmember Hill,
Yes.
Councilmember Pergency.
Yes.
Councilmember Tharp,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Michael, would you like to give us a
Sure. So thank you for that, because I didn't want, I know we have an action item on the agenda. It's important to stay on task. So, so SCED represents 13 counties from Lake County all the way up to Back County. Because Lake County is a due paying number, any municipal government in our district is eligible for basically reduced fees for planning consulting services. Housing happens to be one of my specialties. I've been a community development director or a city planner for going about 15 years. I was the previous community development director in the town of Crescent Butte and also in the city of Salina. So I've been doing it right around the bend here. And so by having the county pay dues and we have intermediate services, I am able to basically be an extension of staff to ensure that we are hitting certain deadlines to try to get housing ready. I will tell you that the funds in the $1 million grant that we're all targeting need to be extended by no later than June 2024. And I know where that part comes from the American Recovery Rescue Plan. Thank you. I always to really hit it out of the park and get to a project that would be eligible for that. Unfortunately, the initial process that I pitched to GOA, they determined that actually doing site analysis would be considered pre-development costs. And that was unfortunate because I'll be honest, and I'll be blunt, you'll learn that as you get to work with me, is I'm pretty blunt. There is no way you ask for $1 million without knowing how you're going to spend it, i.e. how much a sewer main costs to go into the public parcel or anything. So in the next year, and we'll be talking with the commissioners, we are actually looking to beyond the planning scope that you see in here. And this would actually probably not be SCED running the process. However, we would be ensuring that we are making sure that anyone we hire on is completing the process by this coming July. My recommendation is that we form a committee to investigate what public assets, and it's not just city or county, that would also include school district, hospital district, even the college, that might be controlled by public assets to see which top 3 sites are most likely to be developed over the next 3 years for housing. That process would entail bringing on an engineer and an architect after we identify those parcels to look at the top 3 and to come up with conceptual plans and also performance for what it's going to take to get that horizontal infrastructure in there. I can give you my broccoli conversation about how to build housing tonight. I'm not going to do that, but I'll be honest with you, the best way to get for sale or even rental housing up and running in the next 3 years is by eliminating as much of those broccoli costs out of the final budget, because that's what takes that gap that you're seeing in affordability and crunches it. And the biggest one being getting the land ready to go. So what I am asking tonight, and I'm not asking for a motion, but as you start to budget for next year, I would like the council to consider a $20,000 budget line item. If we could, potentially, if the tax initiative passes to some of those funds that you're spending, to be matched by $20,000 potentially by the county. There is some interest from the coalition, as well as interest from the county economic development to also partner in there and potentially even write a grant to, and I'm gonna screw it up, is the Climax Community Foundation. Is that correct? The one misnamed no one you're asking. To potentially come up with between a $40,000 and $50,000 project. What I will say is, having just being a planner in Crestview, one of the most immediate needs is that in the next month, that this council will actually appoint somebody that would serve as the point person on this small committee to start looking at all these list of properties and start to narrow it down to that 3. The reason for that is once the snow flies, we all know that trying to figure out where sewer or water main isn't easy in weather. And so that needs to happen post haste, but the actual development of our queue, bringing and selecting an engineer and architect, that is what the county has hired to do to lead that process, get that paperwork out, allow the committee to make a selection, and by January have them off and running and do community process on those 3 selected sites that actually do the concept, look at entitlement issues that might exist, and also then finally when we get to the summer again, by July, actually have for that cost estimates. And they need an engineering firm will need concept designs to understand where pipes are going, so that they can tell you costs. What that would do is would set up the city and county up for a joint application. The other big number that I want to make sure that the council is aware of as you start to plan the 2022 budget is that the $1 million ask, if it's $8 million, would require a 20% match or $200,000. So that is another big budget number to be very aware of going into the 2022 budget. I'm not advocating that we couldn't get additional funds from other places. So I'm not saying it's $200,000 from the city at this moment, but please be mindful of that as you make budget decisions. Again, I haven't sat in your chair, but I've sat in the staff chair preparing budgets. I know how extensive of a process that is. So it's always good to know that those things are out there in the future. So I'm happy to answer any questions on all of that, but I wanted to make sure that you understood the next steps. The county has brought me on to help facilitate this process moving forward. If the planning grant is awarded, I'm going to be a very busy man working on all these things that are inside the grant. So we probably would hire outside facilitation. I would participate in the site selection process and make sure we're hitting milestones, but I wouldn't be leading it because I already know that the amount of work that's just in this proposal is going to be. So,
Any questions for Michael?
That $200,000 match you mentioned, would that potentially be shared between county and city? Or is that just from city?
Yep, it could be shared. The other thing is, when you talk about an amount of that much, one of the things that you start to look at is, as an incentive, and I don't want to, for instance, one of the special districts, if they're extending a sewer main or a water main, maybe they pick up the engineering tab for that piece of the puzzle, and engineering is typically 10%. So you'd be also including things like that as matched to start to break down. So I don't want to in any way say that it's $100,000 that you should be budgeting. I actually think that through this process will become very informative of exactly how much we want. I will say this, I do not like the idea at all. I do not like the idea of asking Dora for $1 million without knowing the exact decimal point where you guys, what that infrastructure is going to cost. And the other thing is it's not just infrastructure, but actually land purchases are also eligible. And there's some very gray, but Christy thinks that we could do environmental cleanup of the site. It's just the contracting for that feels a little, there's some liability issues of who's the contractor as long as they're not directly connected to Dual. But they do think that that could actually be eligible in space too, right? So there's just beyond infrastructure, but I do suggest that because of the timeline that we start to really focus in on developing projects and building houses.
Any questions? Thank you. Kristen?
I just want to let you guys know, some of the things he's talking about sounds a little similar to what we did in 2019 with the MERP students and stuff like that. Just so you know, Michael has all of that work, and the coalition will ensure that we are not duplicating efforts. And the coalition, obviously, some of the members have been on since 2016 and have been in our community for 20 years and hold a lot of like institutional knowledge. So I am certain that at least one of them is committed to being part of this small group that Michael mentioned. And then I was going to say something about $1 million. But I lost it.
Well, to your point, I would also say that occurred to me too. We've been through this process once, except we didn't go into the engineering of the process. There's a big difference, and we could be talking about different pieces of land. So at first I thought, we're doing this again. I thought, yes, we are. Except this time, we'll get down to the actual engineering of infrastructure, which we did not do in our process in 2019.
And I think the other piece of the puzzle that I have seen from the facility, and I've used them for similar projects, so I've been engaged in that. The other big piece of the puzzle that we all need to keep in mind is because of the time frame that actually gets projects in the ground and up and going by 2024, we also need to talk about some heads. And so, you know, a year and a half entitlement process would kill our chances of grant. So as we start talking about densities and types of projects going in there, we'll also, you know, be keeping a close eye, which the planning grant allows some of that funding for what we have in there to actually cover some of this cost. That would probably be
I remember what I was thinking about $1 million. Thanks for talking, Michael. This is the big project that we need for our community. A lot of this other little stuff that we have been doing is great and fantastic, and we need to do a lot of that to make the whole puzzle work together. But this, like Michael said, this is the eye on the prize. This is the one that will make the biggest impact in the shortest amount of time. This is that House Bill 21-1271 funds that I've been yakking at you for like the last year about. So thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
And then I would just ask that the council tonight appoint somebody to serve on this initial steering committee. I'm trying to keep it very small and directed, so that way we don't have to come back to you, because I'm going to be at the commissioners on the 18th. And at that point, if they bless this.
Give us an idea of what the obligations.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry. Yeah, it would be somebody that could attend on behalf of the city, that would report back to the city council on what's going on between now and the end of the year, before the formal process kicks up. But basically making sure that the city's interests are represented. And what I would say is it would be a city county rep. And then what we really need are the institutional folks on the ground, sanitation district, water district, your road and bridge crews, so that I don't like having meetings about meetings. So these groups, this initial kickoff is really pulling all that information, looking at GIS layers, making sure. But I think the bigger piece is that the council member and the mayor whoever you appoint would be checking back in, because as you guys start to make a big budget decision about doing the development process, you want to know that this is definitely happening.
Would these initial meetings dive into which pieces of land may be available
Yes.
and the infrastructure that's available in each of those pieces of land? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
Okay, all right. City council, do we have somebody who would like to, and another question, Michael, would these be daytime meetings, evening meetings?
I think as far as I'm concerned, I'm flexible, so I don't know what your normal, so as we kick this off, we can adjust. I would say it's probably daytime meetings, because you're gonna be having staff commitments to this, then it's gonna be required.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone on the city council who would like to participate in this committee?
How frequent do you anticipate it would be?
I would say between now and the end of the year, probably 2 months.
I would say I've been involved, deeply involved for the last 6 years. I'd be happy to be on this, but I'd also be happy to defer to anybody in city council who feels like they would like to jump into the fray.
think-
I would be comfortable with you doing it, Gary.
Yeah.
Just because of your
No, I mean,
knowledge base.
Yes.
I honestly would be
Beats the
very willing
punch.
to do it, but I also don't want, want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to suffer equally.
Let them suffering.
Thank you very much. Michael, I will be the representative on your committee.
Thank you.
Well done.
Okay. Jeff, please.
I just wanted, just really quickly, I just wanted to say thanks to the council and, city leadership for being a partner. And it's great that we're working together and not like purposes on this for the community. Well, that's happening in other parts of the country. So yeah, it's just great to be working together. We've got to work together to solve this, that's really just an existential crisis for the community to get to work on. So,
And the county has really stepped up and taken a lead role in this, and it's really been welcome. So thank you.
well, I appreciate that. I feel like with the short-term rental cap, as mentioned, other work we've done, I feel like we're playing catch up as well.
All right. Next up, we have resolution number 28, series of 2021. But does anybody need to take a break before we go any further?
Oh, we're so close to the finish
That's fine.
line.
I'm fine. I just wanted to be respectful of everybody's
Stand up.
bodily functions. Okay. Resolution 28, series of 2021, resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement by and between the city of Leadville and St. Vincent General Hospital District. Dan, are you up? Are you awake? Chief Daly, snap out of it.
Putting out a fire?
He really is gone, isn't he?
Putting out a fire.
He's popping
He's
popcorn. I don't know.
probably putting his boy to bed.
It could be. I have to call him here in a second. But while Dan's preparing to make a presentation to us, we do have that in front of us. I have some notes and some questions for him. We'll see.
I just think this has come so far
Oh,
from the
geez.
very
Oh,
first
yeah,
thing that
remember
you
what?
presented to us. I mean, this
It's
looks
awful.
so great.
I think there are a lot of safeguards in here as I read through it
Yeah.
to protect both entities.
Here he
No,
is.
too late, Dan. We're done.
I apologize for that. Good evening. Good evening. I apologize for that. As soon as I hit my mouse, for some reason, the computer froze up. So wonderful.
Well, Dan, please go ahead and talk to us about this. You have up to 1 minute to make your presentation.
Sure. So I know that we've talked about this for a few years, and first I'd like to just thank Christiana for all of the patience throughout this entire process when we changed CEOs and ambulance directors and just change in overall operations. So way to hang in there, and I appreciate everything you did for this intergovernment agreement between the city of Leadville, and also the St. Vincent Hospital. Most of this is just putting our operational tactics that we've been doing for many, many years and just formalizing most of that. Some of the change, and I'd just like to highlight some of the things that are in here, obviously with Station 2 coming on board. If there's a secondary ambulance, the one that's on duty at all times now, if they want to, if they're not needed at the hospital, they can have a place down at Station 2 for emergency response for those secondary calls that we're seeing an increase of, and also being able to take calls in the south. But so they'll have a rooms available down there. This just takes, it takes care of, if there's any property damage done by the St. Vincent ambulance to the structure itself. We have always assisted the ambulance, but as things have grown and progressed with the fire department, a lot of the fire department personnel work as EMTs on the ambulance service. And so they're certified as firefighters. So we wanted to be able to have some kind of formal agreement on how we can utilize those personnel if we're on scene of any kind of emergency that warrants that kind of technical training above an EMT, and being able to have them assist with the fire department rather than just working in the EMT capacity. Let's see, training we've always done together, but it's going to be more formalized, and we're going to try to figure out a process that takes care of both of all of our CEUs, our continuing education units together. And I guess one of the biggest things with this is actually the wildland fire aspect. Normally what we have had in the past on our agency is that when we have paramedics and EMTs, they can go out on wildland deployment for, as single resource. But what this will do is also incorporate an ambulance on national wildland fire deployments if necessary or if needed, and if they want to put it on availability. And then, the piece of equipment makes a certain amount, and then we decided to split that revenue 50-50 between the two agencies. One, because we would facilitate all the training and the billing and everything that goes along with the wildland aspect, but then we're also utilizing their piece of equipment. So we thought that was a fair split between the two agencies. And then, if we wanted to go for grant funding together collectively as two agencies, having some kind of formal agreement with an intergovernment agreement gives us, I think, a little bit more oomph when we're trying to go for grants collectively, being under an agreement. So, and like I said, most of this stuff operationally, we've been doing for many years. This just formalizes the agreement between us and the ambulance instead of a handshake type kind of purposes. So if you have any questions, please ask them. I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Dan. I'd like to, and your minute's up. I'd like to comment on a couple of things real quick. In reading through this, I think you have crafted it very well, you and Christiana. And a couple of things like agreeing on the medical director and having that be a common medical director for both organizations. I thought that was important, that you would coordinate and research a common record system. Now, that's something you and I have talked about, that the fire department needs a new record system anyway. And the fact that in here, you've put in here that the ambulance service and the fire department will share in the cost of implementing a new record system that you both share, I thought was really, really well thought out. So that will be a budgetary item for the fire department coming in 2022, but it's not a huge number. But nonetheless, those are some of my comments. Any questions on this from City Council?
No, Chief Daly answered all my questions with that presentation.
Anybody else? I would additionally comment while people are thinking about it. I felt like there was a real balance in here between the two organizations and a real sharing of responsibility, but also, making sure that you kept each other apart in the sense of management. So I just felt like it was well done.
Yes, agreed.
Was.
It was worth the wait.
Agreed.
I don't know about 2.5 years, but okay.
There's a tremendous amount of work that went into this.
Well, I have to tell you, I digress and say, Chief Daly has been talking about a relationship between the ambulance service and the fire department for as long as I can remember. And I was on the fire management board for years before I was mayor. So this is not a new theme, but to see it finally put in this form feels really good to me, because quite frankly, I didn't know if he'd ever get it done. I mean, that's just, you look at these things and you say, how on earth is he ever going to get that done? Well, because he's Chief Daly, that's why.
I appreciate the compliment. Thank you,
It
Mayor.
sound like he needs his own like
And,
cartoon or action figure.
Gonna make it, we get him a bobblehead, okay. I'm sorry. It's getting late. I'm getting silly. Any questions for Chief Daly or for Christian? In which case, I would entertain a motion, please.
Councilmember for Genesee moves to adopt resolution 28 series of 2021, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement by and between the city of Leadville and the St. Vincent General Hospital District.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Larissa,
Yes.
Councilmember Hill,
Yes.
Mayor Lobby,
Yes.
Councilmember Gowing,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Green,
Yes,
Councilmember for Genesee.
Yes.
Councilmember Tharp.
Yes.
Christiana, thank you for putting up with this. Oh, yeah, thank you, Dan.
Mayor, I would just like to thank Brett, the CEO, for working on this with me. It's not an easy task to try to come up with, mutual things like this, considering there were two different agencies, and Jeremiah was, the ambulance director, was wonderful during this process too. So I just wanted to make sure that they were recognized as well. So it was a good process overall, working with those two and with Christiana. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have the meetings planner. For some reason, I don't have an October planner. I just have a November planner. But I did want to bring up that city council would normally meet on the Tuesday night of the election. And we had talked about maybe moving that to Wednesday, which we have typically done in the past. Is that okay with everybody? That would be the 3rd of November.
I may have to attend remotely, but I can, because I have to work on the 4th. So
Okay.
I may be calling in from Lamar again.
Anybody else?
The 5th of November.
3rd.
The
The
3rd,
3rd.
pardon me. I will be attending remotely. I'll have my kids on Wednesdays.
Okay, you can bring them.
I'll see if
Excellent
they'll join.
civic
This is a
education.
kid-friendly place. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Max. All right, I don't really have October here. We have next week, we have the city council budget meeting on the 12th, and we'll be looking at revenues. Don and I pretty much have that ready, but we'll finalize it before then and give you an idea of our projection for revenues. And then we're also going to be talking about capital requests. We're going to have 4 different entities do brief presentations to us to consider in the budget. And then we can also talk about broader capital needs that evening as well for various departments.
How did the open house go?
We had 4 people show up. Actually, one was a couple,
Yeah.
and then we had two people. Steve Prestash was mostly there to tell us we were a criminal enterprise and to talk about everything except the budget. So,
Well, you ended up agreeing on something.
well,
That was remarkable.
he's not always wrong. He's right about a lot of things. It's just, it's not where you're right or wrong, it's how you do
You're
things.
so
sometimes.
strikingly diplomatic. I just feel like I
Agreed.
learned from you. But I was in Maine and it was like 10 o'clock there and I
I
was
know.
getting really.
Here's the problem. I want to like the guy because he's really smart, you know,
Yeah, he's really smart.
when he's not off the rails. So what can I say? All right, enough of that. It was what you expect when you invite the public to give you input on things.
And
You
Jeff
don't-
Fiedler
you
was
don't get
there
much.
with some good.
Jeff
accounting
was
stuff.
there. That was very fortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was very helpful.
Jeff.
Jeff
Fiedler.
Fiedler,
Commissioner.
Commissioner
Oh, okay.
Fiedler,
Gotcha.
because the one couple wanted to talk to us about, like county recreation
Yeah.
Right.
and things, and we're going, that's really
ATVs
not that's not,
and-
not something we do, but Jeff did. We're throwing you to the lions.
There you go.
It was kind of funny. In terms of, I'm sorry, back to October, and then, well, there's that wildfire meeting at Freight at 6 the next night, but there's also a P and Z meeting that night.
Ooh. You'll have to choose.
I'll try to be attending the community wildfire meeting. 6 to 8.
I don't know if P and Z is even gonna have a quorum. We're discussing now whether or not they'll even be able to put a quorum together for the 13th. So I may be at the wildfire meeting as well, if I can be, I would like to. Parkville meets on the 14th. You guys are meeting
Tomorrow,
tomorrow at 3:30.
we have an executive session. Right.
Okay.
CJK.
I'm doing a housing
13th is,
presentation
community-
with Noah Saucer
13th.
at the
Wednesday.
housing conference on
my
Friday.
kids
We're
too.
we're doing a
I'll try to
presentation about the
get there
unmet
for
needs
now.
committee and how we put it together and, where the funding came from and all the effort that the community put into that committee. So I'm looking forward to that. Other than that, we have city council on the 19th. We have another budget meeting on the 26th where we consider the city hall budget and the police department budget.
When did Laura get scheduled again?
28, isn't it?
28,
I think it's 28.
There it is,
October,
2
yeah.
o'clock on the
Because
20th.
we didn't have a quorum this time, and so we couldn't vote on anything. And so it'd be super helpful.
Yeah, please, everybody,
Everybody can
put
be
the
there.
28th on your calendar. I know it's 2 o'clock, so that's not convenient for everybody, certainly not for Max and maybe not for Tim. I don't know.
I should be able to make that.
Yeah, let's try and get a quorum together. At this point,
As long as I don't have to chair the meeting.
we didn't tell you about the vote?
I just gave it away that we couldn't vote on anything.
That's hilarious. Okay.
Otherwise, we would have voted you in.
Anyway, but Laura's right on the cusp of really being able to make a difference, and I'm excited by that, but it is hard to put those meetings together. In the meantime, I'm gonna reach out to Brett Ansack, who hasn't, I don't think
I
he
think he
really
should visit those,
realizes
yeah.
that he's supposed to be at those. We haven't heard hide nor hair of Rod Weston, so I'm asked the school board for a different representative from the school board. So, and Kayla was in an executive session.
To Ron's defense, he wasn't on the mailing.
Yeah,
So
and
he may
that's,
not have
that's
even
true too, but he
known.
hasn't been showing up for P and Z or anything, so I haven't seen him in months, and I just,
Riding his bike in August.
Okay.
But I know it's weird.
What did you say about the 28th?
that is the Lura board meeting. We're
At
all,
2.
the 7 of us are the Lura board, including Tracy. And then also, then there are 4 other members. It's an 11-member board,
Okay, you said 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock on the 28th.
If I can make it, I will.
Thank you.
It just,
Yeah.
I mean, I understand this last one, I got the calls and the flurries, can you get on? And
Yeah,
But
I couldn't stay
It
on.
was super helpful not to cancel it, because I still think we at least.
they were great
covered a lot.
conversations. Yeah, we covered a lot of territory, so,
And so
you
thank
were
you.
on for most of the good conversations.
Oh, yeah.
How long do you anticipate it lasting?
I think those are usually 4-hour meetings.
They're usually an hour and a half. yeah.
No.
Max,
I just,
take Max's.
yeah, I think I can make it, but yeah.
3 PM works better than 2 PM, just letting you know.
Does it really?
Yeah,
What does everybody else think?
4 to 6.
I'm just saying,
Just
it's,
happened, I was at the dentist that day.
I like 2 because my kids are in school then, but I can make 3.
well, it's a mishmash anyways.
Yeah.
We'll
for
leave it
me.
at 2 for this time,
Yep.
especially since it's already been kind of posted, it's out
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
But again, as a board, we can decide when we're gonna meet.
Okay.
Okay, you guys are the best. This is really a great city council. Thank you all very much.
I was reading the Summit Daily and they're just tearing each other apart over there. I mean, I was, yeah, it made me feel very thankful to be part of this. And to your point, some of the things we've done, I feel proud of, and it's pretty progressive, pretty forward.
You know, I haven't been able to go in the last year because I mean, quite frankly, the city's so busy. I haven't been able to participate outside the city the way I used to be able to. But I would go to these CML meetings and they would talk about the dysfunction in some of these cities between city council members and then the public attacking city council, and the relationship between the city and county is horrible. All over the state, we're like this oasis of sanity here, where we as a group we're okay with disagreeing with each other and that being okay. I really appreciate that. Anyway,
we don't have the crisis of conscience. Some people do.
I'm not sure quite how to take that. You said we have no morals, no conscience.
Hey, I was just gonna elaborate on what Sarah Mudge was asking from us earlier, as far as this commercial UTV situation that we're encountering. And, you know, as of right now, it is the wild, wild west on the east side with all these UTVs.
It is crazy.
And the reins are gonna have to be pulled in on that.
How do you think we could do that? I totally agree with you. All over the state, side by sides are a problem all over the state.
Yeah.
So
I was going to suggest, I would be willing to participate. I would think that Max, with his experience in the permitting process with the Forest Service and things like that, I know I'm volunteering him.
I said, I nodded earlier.
Volunteering him to join me in a subcommittee to help the county.
Well, let me tell you, I talked to Sterling. We used to have meetings of the Trails Coalition, and it was all these different trail user groups. We'd get together once a month, you know, at Mountain Works, and we stopped doing that. Well, COVID put a stop to a lot of that, but it's probably been a year and a half. And I asked Sterling yesterday, I said, are we going to start meeting? He said, yes. And number one on our agenda are these side-by-sides. You know, that he's very concerned, as he should be.
Are these
Well,
primarily?
I would be happy to sit at the table for those conversations, just because I have experience being permitted on, you know, different entities' lands, public lands, to conduct commercial activity. And
We also need the county, hint Sarah Mudge, because these are county roads that they're running on.
But the county and city, here's part of the deal. And I'm always very careful not to want to punish people who didn't do anything wrong. You know, so our current code is, the county mirrors it, or we mirror them, is you can move to and from the trails with unlicensed off-highway vehicles from your home to the trails and back. You're not supposed to wander all around town.
But commercial activity is something different altogether.
Okay. And so
conducting commercial activity on public lands should require permitting.
Okay. And I won't disagree with you. I just, the conversation we need to have is, where are those public lands? Because the east side, a lot of that is not public land. It's a mining place.
It's the roads, though.
But it is the roads, and you're right. It's the roads and 2-track up there that I think are county designated. And I think we can, to your point.
Yeah.
So what, Sarah, what do you think about that? Would you welcome Max and I's input on some of those issues?
Oh, yeah. No, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know if these worked. Absolutely. No, I would appreciate that very much, because I think there's just, again, like Greg mentioned, the mayor brought up, I think just the conversation needs to start up again. And I mean, to be honest, I am not even sure where there is promotable motorized use other than county roads in the summer and winter in Lake County. And I think that that's gonna be a problem. I mean, we are seeing that as a problem with, you know, I know I've gotten a few phone calls over the last 7 months about people looking to start businesses and guide up on the east side. And first thing I do is ask them if they've gone to the assessor's map and understand that there's primarily private property up on the east side. And I don't really know what else to tell them and where to go. But I would be grateful for the input and to organize the conversation or to be a part of it.
Would you think, Sarah, and I'll also ask Max and Tim, would the Trails Coalition be a good starting point for that conversation? Or do you think we should have a separate city-county conversation? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking city, county,
To begin
just
with.
because we're really not talking about trails, we're talking about roads.
Sarah, what do you think? What format do you think that would take, and how would we put that together?
I've been curious about, look, I mean, well, that's a big question, Mayor. I think we have to look at, we just have to get together and kind of like hit on the impacts, the desire, you know, what we want our identity maybe to be today or in the like short future of what Lake County is. And I think keeping in mind, you know, our bandwidth and actually being able to manage the recreation impacts. I mean, 2020's visitation levels were insane, and I don't know that that's going to decrease. So I mean, personally, I'd love to start more conservative and you know, loosen up as we kind of get a handle on monitoring and management. So looking at impacts, management, I think again, that licensing and, you know, you guys, I wonder if the city, if you all might have to consider changing your table of uses so that that kind of commercial business is not necessarily use by right, but is a conditional use permit in the same way that the mayor licensing is handled, and perhaps limiting that to, you know, an agreed upon number. Again, I think starting conservative and working from there.
Yeah, Sarah, we have two of those entities in town, as you know, and you're right, it is used by right. The only thing we had any say-so over was screened or unscreened storage, which wasn't much, you know, so you're right, we probably need to really look at that table of uses and take some control, because there could be more, and under the current table of uses, we really would not be able to tell them no.
If I can just jump in here really quickly, is that I was up on Prospect Mountain on this past Sunday, and as much as guided activities may think people are the scorn of the earth, actually they run them really well. They're the ones that are in control. They're not throwing as much dust out because they're being guided activities. The places where we got dusted out were the solo people going 800 miles an hour, throwing up the dust cloud as fast as possible, that were not guided, and they were the locals. They were just, they're going crazy. And they were having fun, and they were within their right. They were on a county road that was legally able to do that. The guided activities actually were the least. They were the least noise, they were the least dust, and they're the most friendly, to be perfectly honest. I feel that if we're going to have more people, guided activities, yes, we do have to regulate it. Also, I think we have to start thinking, and this is more of a county issue than I think the city issue, not to throw it over there and carry rocks, Sarah, but I do feel that we need more staging areas, trailheads with amenities, and to actually make it so we have a little bit more control over where and how they regulate. Now, when it comes to guided activities, yeah, maybe having a set like AM and PM launch window, if you will. So if you're going out there recreating non-motorized, the community has like a window, for example, like on Browns Canyon, between half days or something like that. But this is, I feel it would be a good starting point to go with the city and county, and then engage the greater public so we can get buy-in from the community members, which I'm not one of them in the motorized community. We need motorized buy-in, or else this is going to fall flat. And we're going to create more issues on our hands if we don't include them.
I would say this: the bicycle community, the mechanized community, is well organized. The motorized community is not, and that's a challenge as well. So, you know, I don't have great answers right now in terms of how you control that.
Can I say something as a community member?
Go ahead.
So I used to live over on East 10th. And 5 o'clock in the morning, snow machines are running up and down Hazel Street. So it's not just UTVs, there's also snowmobiles.
Well, snowmobiles are in that same, they're, unlicensed.
So you
off-highway
want to look
vehicles.
at summer,
Yeah.
winter
Yeah.
motorized
Yeah,
vehicles.
it's a good point. We are starting to talk about summer, but winter has its own issues. That's right. Thank you. Sarah, go ahead.
Sorry, the other note, I was gonna also echo that the winter and summer experiences for locals may be very different. And one of the other things that I think I'd like the county to think about is like a licensing fee for the snowmobile companies, because really the Snowmobile High Riders Club grooms all of our county roads and provides this facility for them to utilize, and they don't, there's no fee or that they pay to support the snowmobile club. And I talked to Ross, who is the leader of that group, regularly. We've been trying to help him add loops to maintain his funding with the state, because the mine up on County Road 1 had requested that we plow that road, and so they need continual loops to maximize their funding. But I think those are other things that should be considered as well. And anyway, yeah, thank you.
Sarah, let's you and I talk about putting together a city county meeting, if that's okay.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
And don't forget, I mean, we have upcoming in November, there will be the beginning of the community meetings for the recreation master planning. But that we should be kind of seeing opportunities to participate and kind of get our voices heard and hear the feedback from the community on all these things. So let's try to probe those conversations and that feedback.
Christiana?
Thanks, Mayor. As you guys move forward with regulations like these, it's important to note that regulations by political subdivisions like Leadville for off-highway vehicles have to be consistent with, it's actually in a weird place in state law. It's Title 33 because Parks and Wildlife regulates off-highway vehicles for the state. But anyway, so once you guys decide what and how you want to regulate and put together a licensing program, we just want to make sure that it complies with that. So just a heads up.
I would say to that point, the legislature, they've had in front of them multiple times the idea of license plates for OHV vehicles, and it never goes anywhere in the legislature. So that's just to let us know it's a little bit of an uphill battle to put in place the controls that we might like to see. Thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments before we go home and fall asleep?
Well, my rear end fell asleep.
Did it really? Well, you got to go party. Thank you all very much. It is about 9:13 and the city council is adjourned.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Tracy.
Where's your gavel, Mayor? Where's the best?
What's that?